Okay, gang. I think we're here. I think we're live. Welcome to yet another episode of WIC TV, gang, a cross ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Oh man, we got a surprise double feature for you today, okay? Surprise double feature. Right now, what we're going to be talking about now, are men given a fair shake in society anymore, right? We all know back in the days in the 50s and stuff, men ruled the world. In many countries, they still do. But in America, in the Western world, when men seem to have issues, are they taken seriously? Why or why not? Are they treated differently from women's issues? And is that okay that they're treated differently? We're going to get into it. Afterwards, Fairy Queen and I are going to be talking about the hurricane recently that has affected a lot of the Southeast. The various responses to it by on the state and the federal levels, and yeah, we'll get into it there. I'm sure she'll talk a little bit about it as we open here. But welcome, guests. Welcome, dear viewers. And let's just get started. Let's give it to Xerxes first, and then we'll just kind of go around the room. Xerxes, what you got?
It's just for an introduction or my thoughts on the
Yeah,
topic.
thoughts on the topic. Tell people who you are, man.
Well,
Just
so
open us up.
on YouTube, I'm Bass FZZ. I've been making videos around the topic of men's issues in the manosphere for almost 10 years or so now at this point. I've seen rise and fall of many different channels and have many different thoughts, influenced many different people myself. My thoughts on the topic, I think, will be pretty loose. I think will be really interesting, and will probably evolve as the conversations go forward. I think it'll be really interesting. I do think that it's unfortunate that it is very tough to talk about helping men specifically without either their demonization or without trying to switch the focus into how it affects young ladies more. It seems that society is far more interested in young women than they are young men, no matter what the topic is. So we have to contend with that a lot whenever we have these discussions. And shoot, even lots of areas in the manosphere just kind of revolve around how do you even have relationships with women from go to begin with. So women are a huge focus. I think the reality is men and women bounce off of each other a lot more than we like to believe, right? They're not really opposing sides. It's an ebb and flow. But unfortunately, sometimes on that ebb and flow, we need to discuss young men, but we're just like, nah, let's not do that. Let's talk about how they're bad and how they hurt women. So I think today's conversation will be interesting. I look forward.
Okay, I look forward to it as well. Thanks for the $10, Psychonaut. Wick hates your wallet, my wallet. No, I love your wallet, and I'm gonna be in it more tonight. I hope. Testicle Johnson for $2. Velcro wallets, wise rise up. Thank you for the $2. Nice. Call back, I guess, to an earlier show. Let's give the mic to Cham. What are your thoughts here? Men,
Um,
most oppressed
yeah,
class.
um, I think I think a lot of their issues stem from what they've done to themselves at the end of the day. I think a lot of the feminine what is it? Like I think a lot of them want women or want men to like get help and all that stuff and like support men, and I think a lot of time it comes down to men just shooting themselves in the foot, and it's come back and bitten them.
Sorry, I had to change the title. I still had it on my last title, so we fixed it. We are now have the title of what we're actually talking about in the YouTube. Thank you for letting me know. Um, okay, champ, thank you, and we will get into it. Last but certainly not least, Fairy Queen, please.
Sure. So I'm going to go through what my original thing I was going to say, and then I'm going to end it by talking about something different. I'm going to talk about the hurricane at the end. So the hurricane is very important, and I think people need to know. First, to address the topic specifically. So I don't really know what we're talking about tonight. Are we talking about addressing men's mental health? Are we talking about addressing domestic violence that men face? Like, I understand we're talking about men's issues, how men's issues are ignored by society, but what specifically are we talking about? And what specifically do you want to do to address it? Okay. I think those are the questions that I have. Okay. Do you want more funding to be publicly allocated to create male only domestic violence shelters? I think that maybe there could be a conversation for that if you think that that is something that should happen. Do you think that there should be a public health campaign so to encourage men to seek therapy, to seek mental health services? If so, there can be a conversation to have about that. But I suspect that's not the conversation that we're going to have. I'd be curious to hear like what solutions Xerxes thinks should happen and what should be done in order to resolve these problems that men face. But my suspicion is that we probably won't get there. And I think that there are reasons why domestic violence shelters specifically are built for women and why women specifically tend to flock to them more. And we can get into those reasons later. But I really want to focus on what does Xerxes think is the solution and why does he think the solution has not been implemented? But I'll leave it there. Now I'm going to get into the second half, which Wick has graciously offered to allow me to stay on later afterwards to talk about. And that's the hurricane. Folks, I don't know if you realize just how bad it is or how horribly the hurricane has hit people in the Southeast. I'm not just talking about one or two tiny little towns. I live in South Carolina, but it's not just South Carolina. It's South Carolina, it's Georgia, it's Tennessee, it's North Carolina. It's all of these surrounding states that are located roughly in the Southeast. In South Carolina, the last time I checked, according to Dominion Energy, which is the main power supply company in our state, approximately roughly 790,000 people are without power. That's almost everybody up on the west side of the state. So almost everybody on the west half of South Carolina, almost everybody there does not have power, okay? If we go and use South Carolina as a base estimate, and we look at Georgia, and if you look at Tennessee, and if you look at North Carolina, at all of these states, my guess is the number of people without power is roughly a little bit over 1 million, okay? Probably maybe a couple of million of people would be my guess. That's a lot of people. And just to illustrate to you what I mean when I say without power, I don't just mean the neighborhood suburb districts. I mean grocery stores don't have power. I mean gas stations don't have power. I mean restaurants don't have power. I mean businesses don't have power. I mean that for some people that are trapped in these neighborhoods because they do not have power, they have to get in their car and they may have to drive an hour out of town to go to a store that has power to get food to then bring it back to their homes. And many of these people that live in poverty cannot afford the gas mileage to get into their cars and to drive that far and then to come back in order to do it. They don't have the money to be able to replace the month's worth of groceries that have now spoiled in their fridge. They don't have the money to replace the fridge, which is now infested and destroyed because the food was destroyed. They don't have the money for the gas to leave. They don't have the money for a plane ticket to fly out, and so they're stuck. And so the reason why this is important is not just because it affects so many people in so many states, but we're upcoming on an election season. And I don't know about you, but for me personally, and I can't believe this is a very knee-jerky answer, but my response on who I'm going to vote for is going to somewhat depend on how these people respond to the relief aid for the hurricane. And I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. Different subjects, but we're going to try and get through them both today. It's going to be great. The reason originally that I reached out to these individuals last week, before the hurricane, to be clear, I'm pretty sure, I wanted to talk about something I saw on Twitter, right? Something that I confirmed was a thing. They since fixed it, to be clear, right? They've changed it since I checked. But when I saw it and I checked, it was the same. When you would Google something like, why is my husband yelling at me? You would get a link to the National Domestic Abuse Hotline, right? For reporting abuse, seeking shelter, getting help, etc. When you typed in, why was my wife yelling at me? You basically got an ad saying, well, women are emotionally complicated and you have to really see how they feel and check on what their thoughts are. Maybe you said something wrong and that's why she's yelling. Basically kind of that kind of bullshit. And it really got into this discussion, right? Oh, and thank you, Zetsway, for the gift subs. I really appreciate you. But it really brings up this idea, right? And I'm going to tie it to the hurricane a little too, actually. When you see pictures of disasters and things, they almost always feature not men suffering, but women and children suffering, right? That's what people care about. If you have a picture of a bunch of men suffering, some people will care, but you will get a lot less engagement. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is to kind of figure out why we have such a difference of opinion. Cham, you said that most of men's problems are something they do to themselves. Can you elaborate on that? And then we'll get started from there. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, the topic was a little bit about mental health, men's mental health issues, and a lot of times when you bring up men's mental health, I think a lot of men attack each other at the end of the day, about having like mental health issues or wanting to discuss it. And I think, and they've created this environment for themselves that they need to like have no emotions, and showing any form of emotions is gay or something like that, and you look like a pussy and shit like that. And so, and they've been essentially told that for years and hundreds and thousands of years. And now that people are kind of really realizing, hey, okay, they also like need help. Um, I mean, I guess it's getting people are opening up more to it, but at the end of the day, it's also they've kind of done that to themselves.
Well, can I ask, why do you treat men like they're a team or a monolith?
How
Different
what?
groups of individuals within the same, I guess, sexual category, so to speak.
What
Because
do
you
you mean?
say that men have done it to themselves, but it's like, well, some men are jackasses, but some men are great people. Like some men are emotional, kind, they love and respect each other. Some men write books to help other people. Some men really are just like cruel and have a lot of disdain, and they don't like, say therapy. Like, I think of like Andrew Tate and Sneeko sometimes. They like therapy is pussies or whatnot. Yeah, sure they exist, but the thing is, the only thing that's similar is that they're men. So why do we say men did it to themselves if it's multiple different groups
Because it's
within the
because it's been
category battling
Because
each?
it's been men it's because it's been generational of men doing this to themselves and saying, "Hey, you're not a man if you don't do this, and you're not a man if you do that, or you're a man if you show certain kind of
Mhm.
feelings and emotions."
That's my thing though, right? Because I let me just grant that to you. Let's say that there's a man that says, let's just say there's a
No,
whole group of them, right? We'll just grant it. There's a whole group of men saying that. The thing is, there's another group of men who are saying, no, that's silly. That's ridiculous. We are humans. We do
Yeah.
care. We do feel. We do change, right?
And to be clear,
Why is
Cham,
it that we then
how
blame
big?
men, all of us, when within that group there's a battle between them?
but
You see what I'm saying?
I'll piggyback off that, right? I'm Team Xerxes for this one. I'm being real with you. Like Cham, you understand that it's not just men saying that. A lot of women do too. A lot of
I wouldn't
women,
even get
you
there
aren't a
yet.
man if you don't
Go
provide
ahead.
for your family, right? You're not a man if you don't do this, right? I could have gone therapy, right? But instead, I started Warhammer, right? So that's where my therapy money's going. But like, there's a lot of people, right, who, and men and women, who want to uphold this system where men are held to a standard that women simply are not. And women do this and men do this. Why are we just singling out men here? Fairy Queen, go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot I muted my mic. So I wanted to address a couple of things. So first of all, about the therapy thing. So we're talking about men's mental health and how to address men's mental health. Well, you're right, Cersei. Like, not all men, it would probably be inappropriate to treat all men like a monolith. There are some men that think that it's a good idea to go to therapy, and some men that think that it's a good idea to go seek psychological services. And then there are some men who will say that, that you're weak and that you're a pussy if you go and if you do it. And really, like, you should just go to the gym and that's all you should do, right? So it's not fair to say, you're saying it's not fair to say that men did this to themselves. Well, here's my response to that, okay? My response is a couple of things. The first one is, my understanding is that effort has been made by a lot of content creators, by a lot of people, to try to encourage this specific group of men who say and who seem that they need mental health services to go in to seek therapy. And the problem is not just that All men say this. It's that this specific group of people that we're talking about, they are less likely to go to therapy in the first place. So even if you are extremely specific and you do go and you talk to this specific group of men and you try to encourage these men in every possible way to go seek to find a counselor, to go find a psychiatrist, the blunt truth of it is that many of these men simply don't want to go. And if they do go, they don't stick with therapy and they don't do it. And I also will just be honest with you and what I think, okay? And I've given this take to Wick before, about mental health specifically. And it's not just for men, it's for women too. I think it's bad for everyone's mental health to be obsessing about mental health, to be talking about mental health, to know all sorts of vocabulary terms about mental health, and to be incessantly thinking about it constantly all the time, okay? The truth is, I think for a lot of people, okay, and I'll say men, but it's only because the population of people that watch this stream statistically are mostly men. And statistically, that's most of the people that tend to be a Twitch audience most of the time, okay? In my opinion, most of these people here, I don't think a lot of these people who are responding to what you're talking about are suffering because they're suffering from mental health, and just because, I don't think it's because someone was mean to them. I don't think that's what it is. I think you are angry at yourself because you don't do anything, okay? And that's why the gym advice works. The gym advice doesn't work just because you're pumping iron and because like you're getting endorphins. Like it's not just because of the thing that you're doing. The point is you're getting out of your basement and you're going and you're thinking about something else other than feeling sad all the time. You're going outside and you're doing things. And I think, honestly, this is not just true for men, it's true for women. Women have a similar problem with obsessing about going to therapy and thinking about therapy all the time. But it's more specifically for adolescent girls.
I think
I think that both men and women honestly need to stop thinking about
this way. Go ahead.
Yeah.
If
mental health is what we're talking about, I'm going to give you the unpopular answer that I know nobody wants to hear. The man up answer is half true. It's half wrong because it's not just true for men. It's also true for women, okay? I think everyone, okay, most people, okay, would be best served instead of trying to talk about and thinking about and obsessing about mental health. Instead, you try to have good mental health by going outside, doing things, becoming engaged, and not spending all of your time on the internet online by yourself all the time. That's what I think. I've told you about this before, Wick, with Abigail Schreier. Like it's like before.
We'll get into
had this talk.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
But so the reason why I want to respond to that is because I think what it does is it pretends that the only people that have an issue with, say, domestic violence, mental health, or any relationship issue are people who are terminally online and they don't go outside and go to the gym. I mean, look, right? I have this dip bar in my room, multiple different weights. You know, I exercise myself, practice martial arts. That does not change the fact that if I try to have a relationship with a woman, I can just get no diff, say I found someone different or found someone closer or better. Goodbye, see you later. That doesn't change the fact that, like, even if I'm physically strong or I exercise or I go to work or I do this, people still have a negative, just like a negative implication of whether or not I can deal with the domestic violence situation, which if we're looking at the situation that Wick just pointed out here, right, if we're just going to use that as a jumping off, the assumption is that the man has done something wrong, so the woman needs to be protected. The assumption is that if the man is doing anything to a woman, if the woman's yelling at the man, he still did something. There's a negative demonization of man.
Well, but hang on, if I can interrupt here for a second.
Well, hold on, and I'll let you go, right? But I just want to wrap up that the first thing I think we need to do is separate terminally online and pretend that this is a man issue. This isn't the sad dude having a tough time. This is the everyman. This is the average man. These are married men who are in sexless marriages too, that are having an issue, having relationships, feeling worthy as people. Okay. So I think the idea that we just go to the gym and just man up, it's a society.
I'm not saying go to the. I'm not.
Okay,
no, I'm not. I am not just saying go to the gym. Okay, go to the gym is.
You did say like man up.
Let Fairy Queen respond.
I'm saying to be fair, right? I said that this is true for women too. It's true for everyone. Okay, it's true for a lot of people. It's not just true for men. It's true for girls. It's true for women. It's true for. There are lots of people right now who are really lonely. First, before I get into that, okay, Xerxes, you said 3 things, okay? These 3 things are very separable. 1, the girlfriend thing. That's a different thing, okay? The second thing, you mentioned mental health. We'll talk about that in a second, okay? The second thing you talked about was poor mental health, okay? That can be a problem, but we can talk about that. That's what I'm addressing right now, okay? The third thing has to do with domestic violence, okay? These three different issues, not being able to get a girlfriend, poor mental health, and domestic violence, these are three different things, okay? We're talking about mental health, number one, okay? And you do not have to have a girlfriend and you do not have to be married in order to have good mental health, okay? Part of having good mental health is not helping lonely people finding partners, okay? Having good mental health means you have a purpose. It means that you are focused. It means that you're working hard. You're able to take care of yourself. You're able to get up in the morning with purpose and happiness, and you have a good, fulfilling life. And you do not need to have a partner or to have sex at all in order to get that, okay? So
I don't disagree with that, but the issue that I still disagree with is the framing that the people that don't understand that are just terminally online, or they're the lonely people watching the stream. That would be an issue that young men in general, that would include the quote unquote normies, the internet people like to call them, are also suffering from the same thing. Now, those are all just examples, right? Is what I'm saying,
yeah,
right?
But the advice I'm giving you right now,
right?
applies even if you don't spend all of. But hang on, it applies anyway, and I'm telling you how it applies. Okay, this is just a general principle for good mental health. And if anybody that has ever been to therapy, anybody that has ever done CBT or any type of real therapy knows what I'm saying. Okay, good therapy, a really good therapy that you actually works to help people, like CBT. This is not lying on the couch talking about your feelings all day. But it's about
No, but I don't disagree with that. So here's what I disagree with. Like, I disagree that the conversation ends with you as the individual have to go do the mental health work, and then the rest of society we don't need to discuss. Like, no, we need to discuss the fact there is a demonization of males that they are facing, right?
I want to piggyback that. How does therapy or not therapy, going to the gym, any of that, right? Anything a man does, how is that impacted when you have studies, right? You can go watch experiments done online, which aren't scientific, by the way, but they're still, something worth considering, where they have done this experiment where they're in a park, like Central Park or somewhere, and you have a man yelling at a woman on a bench. And then they count how many people come to intervene, how they intervene, what they do, etc., what they say, things, right? They got a hidden camera somewhere, right, watching these things. A lot of people will intervene. Not like everyone, right? But a lot of people will intervene and be like, what are you doing? Why are you yelling at this girl? What's the problem here? You reverse that, and you have a woman sitting on a bench yelling at a man. Almost no one says shit. People just assume, oh, I guess he did something to deserve it. How does therapy, going to the gym, getting out, any of that solve that basic problem?
To be fair, okay, so I'll respond to that. So the short answer is no, it doesn't, right? But to be fair, okay, when we first began talking about this, to be fair, Xerxes, you threw the kitchen sink worth of problems, okay? You want to talk about domestic violence, mental health, and men not being able to find partners. Those are three very separate things. Those are just examples.
Okay? Like, if
we're going to talk about it appropriately, then nope, I'm talking, okay? So, Wick, that's the first thing. So, so you're right, okay? It is true. None of these three things that I've just mentioned necessarily help that, okay? And I would say to you, I think, though, that I think that the tide is turning. I would agree with you that, unfortunately, when men say that they have been abused, when men have abusive female partners, that they are not as easily believed. I think that you're correct in saying that. And I think it's unfortunate that, like, when men are sexually assaulted, or like when they're being verbally harassed or verbally abused, that they aren't being taken as seriously. So I would agree with you. And I think that public health campaigns should probably invest more money in order to try to raise awareness, which has happened, quite frankly. Okay. But I would say to you, like, while I would agree with you that I think that it's unfortunate, and it is true that what you're saying, the next question would be, okay, which is what I opened with. What do you want to do about it? Okay. Do you want more public health campaigns to talk about it? Do you want to open more female-only domestic violence shelters to allow accepting men as well? Is that something you think should happen? What do you want to do about it?
So to answer your question, just to answer the direct question here, there's a couple things. Yes, I think that we need to put more federal money and state money into programs that are specifically designed to help men who are victims of rape, sexual assault, or domestic abuse. That is just a net good. Homelessness programs, that's also a net good. And that will help both men and women. But the harder problem, though, because that won't solve it, Because the harder problem is going to be this. How do we get society, right? How do we get our culture out of this mindset that if a man and a woman are having a fight, that the man is the danger. The man is the one that needs to be watched and is a problem. How do we change that? Because I think that in some cases that's just true, but it's not every case. And I would suggest that a lot of women domestic abuse and stuff just goes underreported, except for in lesbian couples, in which case the domestic abuse rates are like through the roof.
Well,
But
I've heard an explanation for the lesbian statistic, and the explanation that I've heard is that I know the study that you're referencing. The study that you're referencing, I think, also included bisexual women, and I think that I could be wrong about this. Somebody in chat can correct me, but my understanding is that the reason why it's higher is because a lot of these women used to date men. And many of these men apparently were domestically violent to them, like before they chose. And so the numbers are a bit fudged and flubbed
because they
of that.
used to debate.
So it's still men's
Hold
fault.
on.
Is that
Let me see what I'm. What are you saying here? Is because the women who are doing the abuse used to date men, and so they learned it from the men.
is that yeah?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying
yeah,
is that I think like the actual questionnaire is like, have you ever been in a relationship like where you have been abused? Is I believe like the question that is asked. And if you ask women who are bisexual and women who are lesbians who used to date men,
Okay,
then
so
that's
you're saying that stat is from lesbians who weren't always lesbians or didn't know they were lesbians. I don't know how I want to phrase it.
Yes,
and
I'm
used
saying
to
that
date
it's
men,
messier.
and they happen to.
Yeah,
okay.
but hold on.
I don't know if that's
wanna
true. But
focus in
a
on
lot
that.
of a lot of lesbians dated men,
But-
and so like you're usually not lesbian until like later on.
But hold
Yeah,
on, though.
that's
But
very
hold on.
common.
But hold on. There's something real
that's-
interesting about that. There's something real interesting about what just happened in this conversation. We say that lesbians also have rates of domestic violence. And the first thing you did was you went to defend that and explain that and try to figure out how that's actually men's fault. It was actually they were dating men and men were the ones that were abusing them. That's what you did.
No, I'm giving you a clarification about the data, okay? And the data doesn't I don't think that it actually shares that. And I want you to notice something that you've done, okay? Mm-hmm. You are throwing the kitchen sink worth of problems at this, okay? At least Wick was just upfront and told me, okay? And he said that he wants, and I agree with him, okay? I think that probably you're absolutely right, Wick. I think that probably more campaign, more dollars, more public funding needs to be spent in spreading awareness to the fact that men can be victims of domestic violence.
It's not not spreading awareness.
But I can't let you escape
I want to correct that. It's not spreading awareness. What it needs to be done is to build like fucking shelters, right? Because here's a problem. Yeah. There are like a handful in the nation.
Well, it goes deeper than that, Wick.
So I can try to let me and I'm going to ask this. I don't know if this is true. This is my understanding about a lot of these shelters, okay? Many of them are not only female shelters. My understanding is that if you're a man and if you call one of these shelters, even if they won't serve you, they'll help to put you up in a hotel. Or they'll help to find you another place, or they'll provide you with resources locally to your area so that you can still find help. And the second thing that I've heard,
goofy, though? No, like you don't. That doesn't bother you, just in its nature.
Xerxes, okay, so I'm gonna say a couple of things here, okay? So first of all, I think of course it would be a good thing for campaigns to be spent for male-only domestic violence shelters to be built, okay? I think it's a good thing. I think that a shelter like that needs to exist, but I think that it should exist, and I think that government spending should be spent in order to provide those services to men. I think absolutely that should happen, and I think that you should support legislation and you should push for it in your communities to make that happen. But here is the but, okay, on a couple of things here. So, Wick, first of all, like I said before, I think even if you do call a shelter and they won't let you in, I think they will still provide you with services. They won't just leave you out in the cold and say, fuck you. They'll try to help you find a hotel. They'll help to find you a shelter or a safe house where you can go to. They don't just say no, goodbye, and they hang up the phone. So that would be my first thing. My second thing is, my understanding is that a lot of shelters do actually also accept men. They are not only female-only shelters; they actually are co-ed. But they have a co-ed arrangement. I can't prove that, but I did see that's my understanding that a lot of shelters actually do function this way.
They're not a lot, but there's a few. But go ahead.
There are some, right? Yeah. But the third thing has to do with, and this is what I am afraid that Xerxes and maybe some other people like from these red pill spaces are going to advocate for. And they're not going to advocate for building new shelters for men specifically to go to. They're going to advocate that a lot of these shelters, which have been historically single sex, have been only for women, should also begin to accept men into those shelters. If that is what is being suggested, then I do not think that should be supported. I do not think that that is a good thing. I do not think that that is a
Yeah,
responsible
I know
thing for
why.
anyone to
A
support.
male victim somehow finding himself in a room full of a female victim means that the female is now in danger. Is that the implication here?
So I'm
Because
going to give you a couple of reasons why.
what would be happening, right?
I'll answer the question. So this happens in co-ed shelters, okay? The woman, okay, has been domestically abused by her husband, and her husband is afraid, okay, of her suing him, getting the kids, divorcing him, of him being known as an abuser. So he enacts Darvo. He goes to the shelter, okay? And he goes to the shelter to all of the people, and he says that he has been abused. And now the service is legally required to offer him services. And when she goes to the shelter and asks for services, when she goes, the shelter can no longer serve her because they technically are serving her partner, and they can only allow one person in because they're afraid of safety for the rest of everyone else. And that's the reason why you don't want them to be co-ed. You don't want them to be co-ed because it will
remind you a lot of the women's shelter also accepts children. And we all know the record of who sexually abuses children more. Men. Just a spoiler.
Okay, let me read some super chats. Xerxes, are you still with us? Well, no. They got him, gang. The women destroyed him. He's frozen right now. Well, good time to read and make some money, okay? Let me get some of that fan funding in here. $10 from Audacity to say dookie balls. Bravo, sir. Wonderful to add to the discussion. We're here for it. Man, baby, maybe show for $5 to say, is this going to devolve into a stream of Wick complaining about not being able to hit on women in public? Also, Cham is terrible. I don't think we're going to be discussing dating that much. We might.
Yeah, I came back, right?
You're back. You're back. Cool. Let me get through these.
Looks like
yeah, $5 from the Trib1 to say, not going to lie, with the screaming example, it should be so that women get protected in that scenario over men. Physical difference matters. Nuances for a court. Interesting. We'll get to it. $5 from Joe the Mig. Rates in bisexuality couples, abuse rates, I'm assuming, is 67%. Lesbian only is 47%. Psychonaut backing that up. Around 44% for $10. Around 44% of lesbian and 61% of bisexual women have experienced forms of rape and physical violence by an intimate partner, as compared to 35% of straight women. Joe the Mig for $10. Wick, you need to get the Tin Men on for these discussions. He's got mountains of data on this stuff. Most shelters are female only and only refer males to local law enforcement. And then $10 more from Psychonaut. Thank you again. In 2021, about 233,918 perpetrators of child abuse were women, compared to 213,672 male perpetrators. Cham, at least in 2021, according to Psychonaut, you are incorrect.
Which, no offense, is a wee bit obvious only so far as women primarily spend more time with children to begin with.
And then,
which is
$10
better
more.
to suggest
I got one more. $10 more, and then I'll let you go, Xerxes. This show is going to make my blood pressure go up. Thank you for your service, Wick. And this is $10 from Fat Surprise. Thank you. Okay, Xerxes. And then Cham responded to the allegations that
I think should be very clear about like these type of sexual abuse cases, right? Is even if quote unquote more women have done anything, and this is statistically anything, relative to the general population, women do not abuse children, right? Overwhelmingly. This is the case for males as well. Overwhelmingly, adults do not abuse children. So even if there are more, like literally by the numbers of like women abusing their children, other people's children, it's not reasonable to conclude that that means there's something wrong with women class as a being, right? There's something wrong with those women in particular. Much in the same way that it would be a problem with those men in particular.
So again, I think it's important to bring up the context in which this has been raised, okay? The context in which this has been raised is a mom has fled her house with her small children to go to a domestic violence shelter because she feels unsafe because she thinks that her husband might abuse her, okay? Or it's the case that she thinks that a male family or some other family member has abused her children, which is why she's taken the children and she's run. And so even we can argue all day long about abuse statistics between men and women, but the one thing that is for sure, okay, if you have been abused by a partner, okay, you want to be away not only from your partner, but for a lot of women, they don't feel comfortable being even within the same vicinity as a man, regardless
so
of
we just
what the
blame all
statistics
men.
are
So
or
we
not.
just everyone.
No,
If I said that
no,
about
we're
women, would you
talking
let
about
that
like
walk?
no.
But can I ask you, if I said that about
no,
women, would you
Xerxes,
let that walk?
listen, okay? We're talking about people who are rape survivors. You're
Mhm.
talking about mothers
So if a
who have
young
had
man
who
said
have
the
seen,
same thing about
yeah, and for
women,
that
would you
reason,
let
they
that
should have
walk?
a female. They are owed to have a female only space for them to take to go to their children with. Now,
So
I don't
again,
disagree with
would
you.
you
If
let
you
that
want,
walk? If a male took his male
Cersei, I
children
am not
away
going to
from the
talk to you if you're going
female
to interrupt
mother?
me. Be quiet, okay? So
No,
if
but I'm
you
asking you.
Let her hold on.
no,
Let her
you can
finish.
ask
You
me
got to
my
let her
question.
Okay.
I'm gonna
answer.
finish. Okay.
After
Yeah.
she
So
answers, I'll give it to
Mhm.
you, Xerxes. I promise. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Answer the
okay.
question.
So if when we are talking about like trying to address the needs of rape survivors, of survivors of child abuse, survivors of DV, it is a very reasonable accommodation to say, I don't feel comfortable being in the same vicinity or in this housed with people of the opposite sex because whenever I see a person of the opposite sex, it reminds me of the trauma that I have ever undergone. You can begin to build up your confidence to want to leave the shelter so that you can perform it, so you can exist in public later, okay? But when this first happens to you, it's a very reasonable ask. And if the reverse were true, if it was a man that fled to a domestic violence shelter with his children, he said, listen, okay, I don't want to see a woman. I don't want to be near anybody who's female. I'm sorry. That's just how it is. I'm trying to get over it. It would be very reasonable and it would be good for the shelter to accommodate that for him.
Then,
Okay.
if I may ask, Fairy Queen, would you say it would be reasonable to have a racially segregated space for much the same reason? Someone is a victim of abuse. A bunch of black men come and abuse a white woman, right? Do you think that, and they say the same thing, it's not logical, it's not reasonable, it's a trauma response. I know it's not logical, but every time I see a black person, it reminds me of that. I don't feel safe around them. Would you
I
be
think that
okay
like
with that?
if we're talking about like the first 48 hours of this person, and it's not reasonable to ban black people from the shelter, but it would be reasonable for them to have that for like, first of all, let's just talk about like what the statistics actually are for sexual violence, like regarding race. It's this type of like question is usually brought up, okay? Just to be very, very clear
Oh,
to
I'm not
anyone
looking
who
at
knows.
statistics. We're talking about a trauma response, right? So again,
Talking
trauma
about
responses aren't logical, right? They don't. It's not logical for a woman who has been abused by a man to think every man's going to abuse her. It's just not
It's
logical. But
not
it's
at all.
trauma,
Yeah.
and we understand it, right? I can get behind that. Why is it different when instead of gender, we start talking about race?
the answer is because even though I would agree with you that it's a trauma response,
Yeah.
I would argue to you that like most times, like it's very weird, like when we have this sort of conversation, sex and gender are not comparable only when we don't want them to be. Okay. This is an example of where sex and gender, where sex and race are not comparable. And the fact of the matter is, like, even though it is true that it might be the case that this is a trauma response, we don't hold that trauma response to be as valid as somebody who has this response to I'm sorry,
To
am I
men,
echoing
yes.
now?
No, you're
Well,
I'm
yeah.
echoing, aren't I?
But yeah,
If
no,
I
you're
could
right.
come in, I can
Hold
put
on,
some
Cersei.
salt
Hold
and
on,
pepper
Cersei.
here.
Hold on before you
Okay.
go. Yes, you're exactly correct. Society does not hold the trauma response people would feel to different races reasonable. We don't think we should be accommodating them. We don't find that reasonable. But when it
Yes.
becomes not to women, right, but to men specifically, we
Yeah.
do. And men are the only group that we find that reasonable.
Yeah, and I
That's
think
a
that like
problem.
unfortunately, I think the reality. Let me put it to you this way. Imagine for a minute that I came to you and I said that we should build a children's hospital for cancer, okay? And I came and I told you, that children's cancer, this is a type of cancer that's very, very serious. You should really consider donating to the children's cancer. And then you responded and told me, well, what about adults who have cancer, right? Like, what about an adult hospital that's dedicated to cancer? Why can't we build that? Why is it so unreasonable that we can't have a hospital dedicated to adults? And then my response would be a couple of things. One, because we live in a world that's already largely oriented and catered to the needs of adults. And if we didn't have hospitals dedicated to children who were dying from cancer, there would be no dedicated work specifically for kids with cancer. In fact, that's one of the reasons why children's hospitals are important. It's so that you can receive specialized care. It's also because the way in which domestic violence and frankly, sexual assault can impact both men and women. It impacts men and women differently. It has different impacts. That doesn't mean that it isn't something we should take seriously if a man is abused or if he's assaulted. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have spaces for if he's afraid for him to go to if he needs it. But we have to acknowledge that it is not experienced in the same way. It just isn't. And
True.
anyone that
and one of those ways is if a woman needs to get her and her kids away from a man who she is scared of, she has places to go. Men largely don't.
But part of the reason for why that is okay. Can I just ask?
Can I say something?
No, hold on. Let her ask, and then I'm going to pass the ball to you, Xerxes, and then we're going to go to Cham. Go ahead.
There are a couple of things to know about that. I mean, the first one is the risk that a man will be killed by a woman is very low.
Oh, because firearms don't exist.
Almost completely once the relationship splits up. In other words, men aren't trapped in heterosexual relationships out of the danger or fear that they will be killed if they leave. That danger is very real for abused women, which is the first problem. The second one is we don't hear a lot of stories of men losing their jobs because of constant harassment at work from their partners. So, for instance, an angry partner emailing the boss, for instance, nude photographs, or going online and posting tons of things, or picking up the phone and calling 80 times over and over and over again so that boss doesn't want to hire and keep them around.
I just had an argument with Destiny who wanted Supreme Court Justice Alito impeached because his wife was acting a fool, okay? Right? So don't tell me it doesn't happen, but go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, there are very few men. There are men who are victims of sexual assault and violence, okay? But we have to be honest with the fact that the rates of sexual violence between men and women in intimate partner violence, we have to admit that it is overwhelmingly more true for women than it is true for men.
But can we just grant that? But this is my issue, though.
And we also have to grant the fact that one of the reasons why sexual violence is different for women as opposed to as it's different for men is because of the risk of pregnancy. In other words, the risk of being married and staying with a man who is sexually abusing you is not simply, okay, that you're being sexually violated and it's humiliating and it's horrific. It's also that you could be forcibly impregnated with a baby of the man who is raping and assaulting you, and that you have to have the terrible decision about whether or not you will kill the child that is growing within you, or do you choose and to leave him forever, or do you give birth to your rapist's baby? That's something that no man that has ever experienced sexual assault will ever be able to talk about. The closest thing would be she raped me and then had my baby, and I have no say in it.
Yeah, that's not traumatic, right?
Okay, Xerxes, we're going to pass it to Xerxes now. Xerxes, go ahead.
This is my problem here, right? Let me just say I grant this fully, right? I'm going to grant fully everything that you say. The issue I have here is that young men can be victims of so many different things too. What difference does it make if some of them are perpetrators, if some of them are victims? Wouldn't it make more sense that we seek to prosecute the perpetrators, or we seek to isolate or remove the perpetrators and still have very many different avenues to help the actual victims here as well? No one here, I'm not saying this at least, at no point would I ever argue that we need to reduce the amount of avenues we help women out. That would be ridiculous, I honestly feel. So why can't we just increase the avenues of which we help the young men who are the victims? Because we're not talking about protecting perpetrators. No one asked for any of these perpetrators, any of these rapists to be held. I'm not asking for any of that. What about the young men who also get beaten by their wives? What about the young men who've been raped and sexually assaulted by women? What about these men who are being abused and need help? Even if it's less, and I'll wrap up with this.
And then
even if it's true, I'm sorry to say this. Even if it's 100% true that there are more female victims than male victims, it's right here. Why don't we help these male victims? Why? I want to answer to that, so go ahead.
$10 from Psychonaut. He's going to bring up the point I was, so thank you for the $10 for doing it. There's a guy I know who was raped by a woman when he was underage. She got pregnant, and now once he turned 18, he has to pay back child support to her.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So again, to think that men can escape this, No, we have a whole system that if a woman rapes a man and then gets pregnant with his kid, in a lot of cases, now he's just on the hook for 18 years. He can't get away. They will garnish his wages. They will fire him from his job if he doesn't pay these support.
Mess up his licensing.
Yeah, your life's just
Straight-
done.
Suspend your
But
driving
then
license too. Like that
then we're
makes
gonna
sense.
give it
you
to
know?
Fairy Queen, and we're not gonna interrupt Fairy Queen. Fairy Queen's just gonna go and answer uninterrupted, unless Cham wants to interrupt, and I'll let her. Go ahead.
So I'm not disagreeing that that can happen to men and that that doesn't happen to men. But what I'm saying is that is not the same as being forced to being impregnated and being put in the position of being. For some women, it depends on who you are. Some women are pro-choice, some women are pro-life. But for some women, it puts them in the hot seat of deciding whether or not they're going to be a murderer or whether or not they're going to be
You're not
forced.
answering the question.
Or not. Be quiet, okay? I'm talking.
You're still not answering the question.
Let her get to it.
Yeah.
She's long-winded, but that's okay. We all are here. Fairy Queen, go ahead.
So that would be the first thing, okay? Second thing is, when I say it's not quite the same for women, here's a way in which it's not the same for women as opposed to men, okay? How many of you have ever heard of a story of a man being passed out drunk? He was roofied, and then 80 women came in a line and raped him one after the next, because his wife put it online. Have you guys ever heard of a story like that? Or has anybody ever heard of a story of a woman, for instance, like removing the bottom half of like her husband's jaw and chaining him to like a radiator in her basement and forcing him to to be a sex slave for 10 years? Or how many of you have ever heard of a story of multiple teenage boys being arrested and assaulted and kidnapped by a deranged, crazy woman and being forced to basically impregnate her over and over again? And they have no hope of leaving. They have no hope of escaping. Has anybody ever heard of a story like that happening before? Does anybody know of a story?
I'll tell you a
like
story
that
I do know happened.
Let's grant everything. You're still not answering the question.
Is that a yes? Is that a no? You can't think of a story, Cersei?
I cannot think of a story. Can you answer my question,
I can tell you a
please?
story of all three of those, because all three of those.
And
are
I
really
grant it fully. You can have every single story. Why can't we help the victims who are males? By all means, answer that question.
I've already answered this a couple of ways. First of all, you should. Okay, I've already granted that to Wick.
Then
Okay,
what are we talking about then?
Number one, the reason why that isn't happening, okay, is because men are not afraid of dying when they are being beaten.
Some of them are.
But most of them aren't. But
what difference does it make if the young man believes that he is in danger of death?
Okay, now I'm going to mute you because you can't listen for 5 seconds, okay? So here's the deal. The reason why it's different, why domestic violence shelters exist in the first place, the reason why they flee is because they're afraid they're going to die. They're afraid if they don't pack their bags and take their kids and get the fuck out immediately, that their husband is going to kill them. That is a very specific fear that men, even men who have been in domestic violence shelters, like even men who have been domestically assaulted or abused, simply do not express. And one of the ways I know that that's not true is because of the anger that I hear in these stories. So when when you've talked to some of the stories about some of the most prominent people here about being abused, about being assaulted, about their wife or their girlfriend hitting them or striking them, etc., okay, they say, I can't call the cops because if I call the cops, then I will be arrested. I can't call the cops, okay? And that very specific thing that is said by these men is evidence to the point that they are not afraid for their lives. If you think that your partner is going to kill you, if you think that your partner is going to stab you or choke you or poison you or beat you until you can't possibly stand, you don't care if the cops arrest you. In fact, you might hope that they do arrest you, because at least when you're sitting in a jail cell in an orange suit, you know that he's not going to come into there and he's not going to shoot you in the middle of when you're sleeping. And that is one of the ways in which I know that domestic violence is not experienced in the same way as for men as it is for women. It's because for men, the first thing that I hear for many men in here, at least for many of the stories that I've heard, at least, and maybe there are different stories, okay, is they're afraid of calling the cops because they're so mad about the fact that it wasn't treated the same, the fact that they couldn't call the police to come and help them. And when I talk to women about being abused, about being beaten, they tell stories about how they worried that they were going to die. They tell me stories. I know stories of women who they lay asleep in their beds wondering if their husband was going to break in with a gun and shoot them. I've never heard that from a single man.
Yes.
I
You know
think-
why
I
you
think-
haven't heard that from
I
a
think
single man? Because if you start talking about how if they start telling a story, right, like I was about to tell, they get, well, here, I have 100,000 stories about how women have it worse. So you just shut the fuck up and you let it go. Because why would you ever, when every time you open your goddamn mouth, you get flooded with, but women have it worse. So why would I will just shut the fuck up, and maybe I will get a bullet to the head, and that's okay, because at least then maybe you'll believe me.
No offense, but this is the case in point of the discussion right here, Fairy Queen. It's like I'm asking you. We fully grant that women are in these dangerous situations. I've never disputed that. I'm not even going to argue that for New York Minute. I'm asking, why can't the young men who are in these similar situations also have a shot? Why can't they also have resources? Why can't they also be taken seriously?
I've already given that to Wick over and over again. I keep saying over
so
and
then-
over
and
again. More
realistically-
money, more shelters. You can build them.
Exactly.
And
So
you didn't say that though, right?
Mhm.
Then I brought up the point of, if that's what you want, fair enough. But if what you want is to open single sex for women only, open to men, you cannot do that.
I don't think
That's
anyone
what-
here wants that. Do you
Well,
want
I'm-
that?
you know what I want? I want I want you to not assume the absolute worst of young men, which you have done in this
I'm not
conversation.
assuming. I'm
You're
telling you
amazing,
the reality
but
of domestic
that's my.
violence
But
and why
this is my point.
it's different because you're not
when we
afraid to
brought
die.
up, but this is you don't know that. That's the thing.
I do know that.
That
It's
you
just
don't
true.
know that. And here's
I
the
know
worst
that.
part about being
I
a
know
man.
that
Let me
typically
tell you
speaking,
something.
men, they'll
Well,
risk their
let
men
I'll tell you
Xerxes
something
go for a
about-
little bit.
about
Let
young
Xerxes go
men.
for a little bit,
Because-
and then you can respond, Fair Queen. I promise. But Xerxes,
Yeah,
go
because
ahead.
I think this is where your ignorance of young men comes in. No offense to you, right? Because ignorance just means you lack knowledge. A lot of young men have to put on a front of strength because they're afraid of what happens if they look weak. You don't connect with or understand the fear and the insecurities that very many young men have. And so your assumption is, well, they're not afraid. I don't see them. They don't talk about it. They don't write their form. They don't do that. It's because they can't. The socialization of being a young man is that you always have to have some type of projection of strength. Least you get disrespected or ignored or disregarded. In fact, Cham brought that up earlier, right? And what I'm saying is we're upset with men as a class, as an existence, instead of saying, well, hold on, maybe there's something more about being in all these different groups, all these different archetypes of men that are more complex than you're not afraid of your life. You don't know that, my man. There's very many young men who are in these multiple different situations who don't talk about it. Men who get beaten up.
Wait,
Guess what?
what's the worst case of domestic? Like, what's the worst outcome of domestic violence?
For a young man,
What in general?
the
Man and
person
woman-
can die.
what's
That's the
okay.
worst case scenario.
Alright,
Well,
you can go-
I don't know if
you
that's
can
the worst case, but that's a pretty bad case.
What's and
I don't
go
know, it get
look
worse
up
than that.
and
oh,
go
you're
and go
in
look up
prison for years and can't get out. and
versus
you're done,
death.
you're good. Yeah. I don't know. Like, aside from the point, fair enough. I'll go with what you're saying.
I'll give
We'll
you,
go with
Go,
it.
here,
go
I'll
look
give you
at
this
go,
story.
then go look at FBI statistics and who's dying more by their partner in the hands of their partner. Is it men or is it women? It's massively women dying under the hands of their male counterpart male. That is why there are more shelters set up for women because they're the ones statistically vastly going to be affected by domestic violence.
Blocky Blah actually for $10. I remember a story. This is his story. A woman removed her husband's genitals and threw it in a garbage disposal. And then mainstream media laughed at the victim and praised the woman.
That did happen.
That is
I remember
There
horrific.
was jokes
Yeah,
about
it's
it.
called Bob.
I made
What's her
them.
name? Bobbit.
Yeah, Ashley
Bobbit.
Babbitt or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She got yeah. I mean, fucking.
There was
Wick,
a
you're being
song about it.
hypocrite
I
then.
remember the song about it. In the kitchen, the Bobbit kitchen, Lorena takes a knife. In the bedroom, the Bobbit bedroom. And then, like, I forget the song, but we sang it as a child. Could you imagine us ever doing that in school, in a public school, about the horrific abuse, like the female genital mutilation, or if a man cut a woman's tits off? Of us making a song, children making a song about it, and then singing it and making jokes.
I mean, we got Ring Around the Rosie where it's like burning women alive. So I don't know.
Well, they burned
I mean-
everyone alive. It's
I mean,
not just
let me
women.
It was mostly during the.
Even if it was mostly, it was everybody. That's the thing, right? This is what I'm saying.
Alex-
It's like
Alex-
Well,
it's
hold
like
on. Let
everyone.
Cham go a little bit. Let Cham go a little bit. Cham hasn't
sorry.
gotten some time.
I mean,
Let's give
that's
Cham some time.
that's just the witch trials. So I mean, it goes like both ways. I think both of us, the women on this panel, could admit that's a fucking terrible thing. Shouldn't be cutting off dicks.
But this is
Okay,
but this is
glad we
the
got
whole.
that.
Cut off a dick.
So
It's not worth it.
So a couple of things. So just to respond to what you were saying, Wick, okay? So Wick, I'm just going to be honest with you, okay? Like the hurricane, there have been a lot of things like over the past really month of August, a lot of things that have happened to women's issues. I hear all the time that like we don't talk about men's issues enough. We don't talk about men's mental health enough. We don't talk about like men being abused. We never spend any attention to men. But the truth of the matter is there is a lot of attention and time that has been spent in this space for over the past 3 years about incels, about the red pill, about helping men find
Yes, there should be.
relationships.
Yeah, there should be, though.
Selflessness. But you know what there's been no coverage of from over the past month from almost nobody? I have heard nobody except for maybe Brittany Simons, probably the only person who's even mentioned the Giselle Pellicott case. Nobody's mentioned that, okay? The Roxanne Giggle versus Tickle case, nobody's covered that. What's happening in South Korea to women, nobody's talking about that. Nobody is talking about the Taliban, that they've overtaken Kabul, or how they're abusing women in Afghanistan. Almost nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about like what's happening currently in India, about how there was a woman who was gang raped, multiple women.
Oh no, we've had a lot of
gang-raped.
people cover that actually. The India thing,
In
the
here-
tickle
in
stuff.
here-
No, I haven't heard anything about.
In
But
here, I have not heard about the India stuff.
I haven't
here.
covered it specifically, but I could probably point you to streamers who have. I'd have to look.
The India,
right?
the India,
India
I
stuff,
know
yeah.
that Stardust like made a post about it, but I haven't actually seen any streams or any announced like coverage of it. And the reason and then there is the Olympics, and yeah, we did talk about Imen Khalif for a little bit, and that was certainly a women's issue that was talked about. But what wasn't talked about was the fact that though there was the Olympian who was like bullied because like she was a masculine woman who was like really, really tall. She was a rugby player. That was never covered. The fact that there was I think it was Egypt versus Spain. One were in bikinis, one were in complete like little itty bitty bikinis playing like in the sports, and nobody ever mentioned that. Nobody talked about the fact that, and actually that's not true. There were a couple of people that did mention it. Not on this stream, but I think on Prime stream, I think it was Lactoid who talked about how there was a rapist who was allowed to represent a country in the Netherlands to then go to the Olympics. Okay,
A pedophile.
all
Not
of
even
these,
beyond that. Pedophile rapist.
and I mentioned all of these things just to say that the narrative that is so commonly pushed around here is that men's feelings are being ignored, that men's issues are being ignored, that the cry of male problems are being ignored.
But see,
when to me it seems overwhelmingly the opposite.
I
It seems
get you,
actually
but I have a
opposite.
very easy way to get all those issues talked about. You host a panel on men's issues, and those issues will come up. I promise you, every single time, right? And
All
that's
of these
fine.
things like
It's
Roxanne
fine.
Gibble,
right?
South Korea, Afghanistan.
You're just bringing them up. You're talking
don't-
about them right now.
Men are going to talk about that. They're not going to talk about it. No, they're not. I already know.
They don't know about it.
But yeah, no, they're not going to talk about it. They're going to talk about all the things that Xerxes mentioned. They're going to talk about vaguely about domestic violence shelters, which they don't care about really. But we can, sure, if you want to put money and if you want to put your money when your mouth is, talk to your local representative and push to have them build. Or better yet, if you're rich enough, you can push yourself to have them build. But you're not going to do that. And why aren't you going to do that? Because you don't really give a shit. That's why. You don't. In mental health, you could try to find a therapist and you could try to improve things for yourself. But are you going to do that? No, you're not going to do that because that's not really an issue you give a shit about. And
Do you
finally,
think that the
girlfriend
only
thing.
reason people don't do things is because they don't care enough to do them?
That's honestly just not true. There's multiple people that support Jordan B. Peterson because they do care. Number one. The reason why we have the manosphere as a space is because people do care. Number two,
I
right?
think a lot of people in the red pill and a lot of people who claim that they are men's rights activists actually do not care at all. I think what they
But this
really
is what I
care
don't
about
understand. How do you
is
say the
fact
men's
that
rights
women-
activists
I'm
don't
so
care?
sorry, Xerxes. I think the real thing that they care about is the fact that women's issues are being talked about, that men are being described as being abusive towards these women. And what they want is not for more money to be put to domestic violence shelters, not for more money to be poured into mental health services, not for them to actually get up and to go and to improve their lives. What they want is for you to shut the fuck up. They want you to shut the fuck up.
Hold on.
about
So
all
I
of
don't
these
even. I
things that
can't
are
even
happening
agree with
in
that, and I can't
Kabul,
let that
in
walk.
Afghanistan, in
Hold on.
Australia, in India, in Pakistan,
Hold
in
on,
South
hold on.
Korea.
This is my
That's
issue.
what they want. They want you
No,
to
I have
shut
to
the
say
fuck up and they want you to just get out of their way.
No,
That's what they
I don't
want.
believe that for a New York Minute. Not only because of the amount of content that I've absorbed from Jordan B. Peterson, where he talks about how both men and women in a marriage, in a relationship, can work together to make it better. And there are many people that love to listen to him and follow him. But all the different videos that I've talked about and I've discussed, and all the different times where I've had this. Just recently, I made a video, right, where I saw on Twitter a whole bunch of guys were quite ironically using the idea of objectification or women objectifying themselves kind of as an insult to their intelligence and their lack of ability to think. And I came in there and I said, guys, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's nonsensical to be upset with women, number one, but to, remark them as stupid because they have this experience, for two, because of the way they get socialized, right? So even me in this space for 10 years will still say, hold on, wait a minute. That's not reasonable. That doesn't make any sense, right? And I'm not the only one. There's many people out there. The point that I'm making is the fact that there's lots of different content creators and there's men's rights advocacy groups, people like Paul Elam who've been doing this for years, men like Mel Fight who've been doing this for years, who try desperately to get stuff moving. And they get lambasted and they even get stopped in real life by different feminist picket signs. People literally stopping individuals from going into talks and speeches that they've had. This has been going on for years. I remember this back in 2016, 17, 18. They literally stopped. They will literally go in and mess up just groups of people, of men trying to do this. There's a literal active battle against them in real life, not just on the internet comment section. So the truth of the matter is, people they do try, and they have been trying for years. There's this one case, and I'll wrap up with this. I'll let you have the floor.
You can respond very quickly.
And I'm going to wrap up with this. I'll let you have the floor. I remember every single specific detail, but I remember the end, and it always just sticks out to me. There is a man who really did try to create a domestic violence shelter for men. Not only was he stopped at every stopgap by feminists, but they insulted this man and harassed him so much, he ended up killing himself afterwards. They destroyed his project and he ended up killing himself because they would not let this man create one domestic violence shelter for men. So the idea that there aren't people trying is not true. It's ridiculous. And I think you have to contend with the fact that young men, and again, including in the space of the manosphere, are trying. Here's what's interesting, and I'm sorry, I'll extend and finish with this. This is the craziest thing to me. If people make a video response about how terrible and awful the manosphere and incels are, hundreds of thousands to millions of views of them being wrong and coming to awful conclusions about these young men that need help. If a dude just sits there and just talks about how his life sucks, he only just gets more people who say his life sucks. That's all that happens. They don't come together and collude for evil, right?
Okay, we're going to give it to Fairy Queen, and after Fairy Queen's done, I got a lot of super chats to go through, so go ahead.
So I'm going to make a list right now of domestic violence shelters that are exclusively for men, okay? One of them is called The Family Place. That's in Dallas, Texas. Another one is called the Taylor House for Men. That's in Batesville, Arkansas. Another one is called Daddy's House. It was proposed, not funded. That's in Atlanta, Georgia, okay? Another one that is a domestic violence shelter for both sexes, which is in California. It's called the Interval House. It's in Los Angeles and in Orange counties. There's another one called 1736 called Family Crisis Center. That was in Los Angeles. There's the Marjorie Mason Center. That's in Fresno. In Missouri, there's one that's called New House and Hope House, Turning Point. And I bring all of this up just to say that it seems like a lot of these other states have managed to have like domestic violence shelters that do have outreaches for men. And so the idea that like this is nearly impossible and that if you try to do it, that you'll be basically beaten out of business, that doesn't really seem to actually be true, because we do have these shelters that in fact do exist. And I've just listed to you like a whole handful of names of them.
Plus the co-ed ones.
Yeah, and the co-ed ones. Number two, okay, so that's number one. Number two, it's interesting you should mention Paul Elam. I know a few things about them. One of the things that he was famous for saying is to say that he has never met a single woman in his interpersonal life who he believes does not have borderline personality. That's insane. He thinks that almost all of the women that he knows, and his ex-wife, his daughter, all of his neighbor, they all have BPD. This is something that he has been recorded on tape saying. And then there's the matter of like, and I'm sorry, he's the perfect example of what I'm talking about with Marvo, okay? He claimed that his wife was abusive. He claimed that she was terrible. He had a whole story about his wife. Well, when the actual truth is, when you actually look, there was a whole BuzzFeed article that did a deep dive into his background. And what they found was not only was he abusive, he abandoned his daughter, and he was angry at the idea that he would have to pay child support. He wrongfully accused his ex-wife of cheating on him and having a child with another man, which wasn't true. When he was invited back into their life, the life of his daughter, to then meet his son, to meet his grandchildren, he spanked both of them, and he was angry and violent to them. And so that's the reason why the daughter doesn't want to have contact with him anymore. And so I think he's just the perfect example of like what we're talking about and what we're afraid of, like when we're talking about like the manosphere, when we're talking about violence, which is this fear of Darvo. The fear that a lot of these men, and this happens to a lot of shelters, this happens to a lot of women when they try to go to these shelters, okay? Their husbands go there first. If they're co-ed, they go there first and they say, I have been abused, so that they can usurp and so that they can take this service away from their wives so that their wives can't go there.
Yeah, but
That's
I would be
awful.
honest with you.
That's
but here's
awful.
the
I
thing,
agree. That's awful when men do that. That's awful. I think there should be women-only spaces. I think that's good that women-only shelters exist. Yes, great.
And there should be men-only shelters too.
Yes, but notice how you can list all the ones that exist for men. I can't for women because we don't have 5 hours to go through a list, right?
First of all, I don't know if that's a comprehensive list. That's just that's just a handful of like examples of domestic violence shelters that either also accept men both in a co-ed situation, or it's the case that they are single-only, sex-only spaces. Now, I'd agree with you that it's probably true that there are fewer single sex-only spaces for men to go to. But again, that ties back to like what me and Cham were saying, which is that the reason why these men don't go to these domestic violence shelters is because, quite frankly, they don't need them for the same ways. And they don't need them because the likelihood of them being murdered by an ex-partner for leaving their partner is much, much lower as opposed to a wife leaving an abusive husband. That's the reason why there's a difference.
Let me get through some of these super chats. I got a lot. Thank you, gang. Gang, you've been so generous today. I really appreciate my audience. You're abusing me with your money, and I don't need a shelter for it. Continue to abuse me with your money. Continue to super chat. Continue to give some subs, give some bits. I see you all. I see you, Testy Johnson. I see you, Polar Knights. I see you, Zetsway. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to go through them real quick, and we'll have a lot to discuss because I'm sure you're all going to be mad at these. Every single one of you, okay? Joe the Mig for $5. It's not a reasonable accommodation when the resources are so wildly distorted relative to victimization rates. $2 from Letta Vient. Is it okay for women-only shelters to ban trans women? Tricky. Okay, $5 from the Trib One. The answer to the race question is because there are very few inherent differences between races compared to male and female, which have many. $10 from Psychonaut. There's a guy who, well, we already read that. $5 from Joe the Mig. Also not wholly true. U.S. rates of man to female sexual assault is 35%, and female to male sexual assault is 28% in intimation relationships. 1 in 3 versus 1 in 4. Thank you. $10 from Blocky Blah. Oh, we already read that. $5 from Brian Townsend. Once again, we try and have a chat about men's issues, and we're spending a majority of the time talking about how women have it worse. $5 from Trib One. The avenues are there for men.
Yeah.
Societal norms are against men using those avenues. Fairy Queen is unironically adding to that sentiment. Help all victims. $5 from Fat Surprise. W. Wick. Thank you. $10 from Joe the Big. What a load of trash. Men aren't going to opt for an orange jacket when the rates of grape are astronomically higher than any classification of Gen Pop. $5 from Overlord Clyde. I know a man who woke up with a gun to his head by his ex who broke in. He was a cop. He had him pinned down and gave him a new part. Fairy Queen, same bad shit. $5 from Joe the Mig. Stop generalizing male perps of sexual assault with male victims of sexual assault. Blocky Bob for $5. I want you all to realize I said that story about the dick getting cut off generically, and every person has assumed a different example of that exact story. $2 from the Trib. Oppression Olympics is AIDS. $5 from Joe the Mig. Ring Around the Rosies is about Protestants in Victorian England banning dance. $10 from Psychonaut. The volleyball uniforms allowed to choose their own uniforms. The women could choose to cover up if they wanted to.
That's not true.
Did we talk about volleyball issues?
The Olympics and stuff.
Oh yeah. $2 from Drew the Meg. Pull your out sells up by the bootstraps men. $10 from Blocky Blah. Do we know the history of the response to men talking about men's issues? Also, men being described as abusive is a men's issue when the vast majority aren't abusive. $10 from Audacity. Speaking of hurricanes, you know what else really blows? This conversation. Well, thank you. $10 for Blocky Blah. The timeline of Earl Silverman was that he was an abuse survivor and a feminist, realized men had problems too, tried to duplicate the domestic shelters that were made previously, and feminists boycotted him. $5 from Blockyball. The boycott was unfortunately successful enough to get funding removed, and he ended up killing himself after he sold the property.
There it is.
And then $5 from Majin for the Emperor. Okay. Cham, give the ball to you. Thoughts so far?
Yeah, I mean, we started originally, I thought we were gonna mostly focus on mental health of men and what they can do to kind of tackle that and stuff. And it did derail to blaming women. I do
No, it
think
didn't.
I
What are
think
you joking?
you brought it up. This first thing is you
Blaming
brought it
women? Are you
up.
joking? Literally,
No matter what,
I
it
have
always
given
shifts to, like,
Let
the
Cham finish.
floor.
Let Cham finish, and then we're gonna give you the
That's
floor.
crazy,
Xerxes.
bro. That's
it's
great.
like
Go ahead.
it's like the only thing that, like, the first thing that came out of your mouth was like about we bring up mental health for men, and then you gotta like bring women into it. And so
They were examples, bro. I'm sorry.
I mean, that's
Go
what
ahead.
you did. You
But
derailed it into women,
my
so
point.
that's on you.
Here's what my point was. My point was that the individual doing well for themselves mentally does not change societally all the different issues they'll have to face. That was all that point was, which is
And
still
who-
true. You can't dispute because that's just objective fact.
Look,
Okay.
feminists want you guys to go get like mental health. Go do it. And if it
I
comes
want
to
people
abuse,
to get help
then
mentally too. It
you
doesn't
have options.
change
You can go look
even
it
just
up.
the nature of this conversation. It doesn't change
But
if
then you're
one
butthurt
dude
that women
with multiple
have
men.
more shelters than you do,
It's
even
not
though
about being butthurt. See,
even
this is the
statistically,
whole problem.
even
It's
though
not about
Hold on.
being
statistically there is a
butthurt.
Give it
reason
to.
why
I know.
that is the
But
case.
hold
It's
on.
because
Hold
more
on.
women
Cersei.
are being
Let Cham get it
abused.
out. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're like, it's
Okay. You know what? Actually, because it's funny to me, we're gonna give Fairy Queen the floor first, and then you can respond to both of them at once, Cersei. Fairy Queen,
Okay.
and then Cersei.
Okay. There was a question in there. I'll be spicy for a minute and I'll answer it. There was a question about whether or not trans women should be allowed into domestic violence shelters that are female only. And for me, I think the answer to that, honestly, is the question is whether or not they're pre-op or post-op. So if we're talking about somebody who is a post-op trans woman who has been on hormones and, to be very vulgar because we have to be, okay, has no dangling participle whatsoever, okay? Like they have had bottom surgery, okay? And they've been on hormones and they have gone through the process and they've been this way for like over like 5 or 10 years, okay? Then maybe there's a conversation to be had. But if we're talking about someone who is very new and recent in their transition, who is just, I think that is an entirely different conversation, okay? And I think that's important to say. So the second thing is, just so that everyone here knows, and I know this is going to make a lot of people angry, okay? This is a problem that women do face, like in domestic violence shelters. And this actually just happened recently in Edinburgh. I don't know how many of you know what recently happened at Rape Crisis Scotland. That happened recently this past summer. There was a trans woman who worked there, and she instructed basically a lot of the other. I'm just going to read to you what J.K. Rowling's letter is to one of the people who used to run that rape.
Hold on.
Center.
How long is the letter?
The letter is like 200 words. It's not long.
That's pretty
It's
long.
not very.
Well, okay. Let her read it for the content, and then we're gonna go to Xerxes. And
All right,
Xerxes
dear
will get
Sandy.
time.
While you have been in charge at Rape Crisis Scotland, a man now serving time in prison for multiple sexual assaults was, quote, treated at the Edinburgh Centre. The man in charge of the Edinburgh Centre called the rape survivors who wanted single-sex services bigots. Under your leadership, she's addressing this to the person who used to work there, whose name is Sandy. Multiple women self-excluded from the Edinburgh Centre because of the male CEO you defended and praised. On your watch, a 14-year-old girl who had been raped felt unable to access support because she wasn't guaranteed a single-sex space. You claim I misrepresented what happened at the meeting at which rape survivors were harangued by your trans activist partner who shouldn't have been there at all. Here is the survivor's own account of what happened, and then she provides a link. For years, you've been told by women's groups and rape survivors themselves that your policies have been harming.
To be clear,
listen.
But to be clear, like I don't have any information on this, and I don't know if I want to turn this into that kind of debate. Does that make sense?
Well, I just wanted to give my answer,
Sure.
and that's
fair enough.
That's the reason, by the way, why. Okay, I don't think it's appropriate to go to these women who are specifically go to these shelters because they are single sex spaces, and to tell them that they need to reframe their trauma so that people who are either newly transitioning can come and can also feel comfortable, or so that people who are cis men can feel that they can come and to have access to the same space. I don't think that that's fair to those women. I think that we need to defend single sex only spaces for people who are survivors of assault. I
Can I,
think
can
that's
I ask a quick question? Just a quick question. I want you to kind of continue. Is it all right for a traumatized person to mistreat an individual who hasn't done?
What do you mean
You
by
cut
mistreat?
out there at the end.
Oh,
I
I'm sorry.
think, yeah.
So my question, if I'm still coming in, is it okay for a traumatized person to mistreat an individual who has not done so?
Define mistreat.
Okay. You assume the worst of them, and so you insult them, or you even physically attack them. Is that okay?
I don't think it's okay to insult or physically attack anyone unless it's in self-defense,
hmm
or unless. So
Well,
I
let's
don't
try
really.
this. Fairy Queen, you're walking down the street at night, okay? Someone's following you, or you think they are. Okay, you're like, oh my god. So you turn the corner thinking, okay, maybe they're not following me, right? But they turn the corner too. Do you throw a punch when they come around that corner?
You mean I'm noticing that a person is
Yeah,
following
you
me?
think
Like
they're
what they
following you. You think that they're a threat. Is it okay to respond to that threat with violence?
I think that no. I think that
Okay,
if you think that
that's fair.
somebody is following you, I think that you should have. I think you should be smart. I think you should have pepper spray in your purse when you go out at night. And I think that you should be aware of where your car is parked. And I think you should think about these things beforehand. But unless the person actually aggresses on you or does something, I don't think that you should react violently. No.
Okay. Do you think it would be okay to insult them, to be like, get away from me, you creep, or something like that?
It depends. Like, are they coming too close? Like, it depends on the context,
Let's
right?
say
But
they
no.
are coming too close. Let's say he's
Do
coming
you
too close.
walk like if you walk multiple blocks around and they continue to follow you? Are you asking if women have any say on, hey, this is a little suspicious?
No, you
By
added
the
that
way,
context.
I'm sure both of us women have experienced this, where
I'm
we've
sure.
been in a situation where we question what's gonna happen. Are
Yep.
we
I will
are
grant that
we
fully.
are we bad people for maybe thinking, what should I do in this situation? Am I gonna be considered a
No.
fucking man hater? If
No. No, not at
so,
all. Not at all.
so
There's multiple times I've entered an environment and I've looked for escape routes because I'm unsure. There's multiple times I've walked past a group of men and I've been cautious as to whether they would attack me or rob me. No, that's not the problem at all. The
do you
question
have that
is,
with women?
if
Out of
there's
curiosity,
not, I
do you
have
feel
before.
unsafe when you've met
I
up?
do feel not. It's ironically I feel unsafe when I'm alone with a woman, not with groups,
Why
which
is
is
that? I'm
strange.
just
Sure.
good now. Hold on.
Um,
I know this is gonna be a little derail. Why are you scared of women alone?
because the, to be honest, it's because I know, and I've had different experiences with this, that because we're alone, if she says I did anything, if she even assumes I'm sexually attracted to her, she can weaponize that against me very easily. And I've seen it consistently in my life where people will assume the worst of me because a woman said XYZ thing. In fact, I can give you an example of this. I was thinking about this the other day. I was telling my friends about this time back in college where this girl who I was friends with, I'll tell the short version of it, right? Flipped around and said I was stalking her to her boyfriend at the time. I guess to kind of throw off any guilt that she might have felt. And I showed my friends the girl, and one of my friends was like, "And you weren't trying to date her?" And I was like, "No, she's." I told him I was like, "No, she's actually too skinny for me. I really didn't like that, just physically." And he was very skeptical about whether or not I actually found her attractive enough to date her. And to me, what that indicated was just a confirmation that if this girl just says I liked her, people would believe it. They would believe I was trying to do something, even if I didn't even if I didn't care. And so being in environments where I'm alone with a woman kind of scares me because it's like, one, I'm black, right? That's another thing. That's another layer to it as well. People very quickly are quick to assume that I would do something or I would try something with a woman. And it makes me extremely uncomfortable. I do not like being.
You're cutting out at the end. But
I
maybe
said
only,
I don't. Yeah, I don't
you
like
don't
being
like being
alone.
around alone with white
Alone,
women
I don't like it. No,
specifically. Okay.
not unless even then. Like only if it's like a date. Like if I established before, that's different. But like if I'm just at work, I don't like it. I'll be honest with you. I hate that.
Okay. I'm fair enough. Responses to that?
I mean,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, like, what response can we have? I mean, like, we've been talking about some pretty serious things, right? Like, this is why I keep criticizing you, Xerxes, for throwing the kitchen sink at this, okay? Is because I
He
keep
asked
saying,
me a question.
look, I keep saying this over and over again. Like, to me, like, it feels to me, the reason why a lot of feminists and a lot of people, like, when the issues of male domestic violence or male sexual assault or men's mental health, why there is a collective eye roll is not because anyone here or anyone thinks that those aren't serious issues, or that, like, if a man is sexually assaulted or is abused or stalked, that isn't something to take seriously. The reason why people pull back a little is because it feels like that's really a red herring. It doesn't feel like that's really the issue you care
But
about.
that's my life, bro. That's
It does
crazy.
not seem
That's
to me like-
crazy.
no, it
Yo,
doesn't seem like
I
at all.
lived
But
my
it
life.
actually seems to
I
me
lived
is
my
that we
life.
I
I've
am
experienced
talking.
these things, and look how quick you were to dismiss that. That's
Okay,
crazy.
let's give it back
That's
to Fairy Queen.
crazy.
Let's give it back
Go
to Fairy
ahead.
Queen. Fairy Queen, Fairy Queen.
Go ahead, Fairy
Look,
Queen.
Look, okay, it is frequently the case, like, when these issues are brought up, it doesn't really feel to me like the people that are talking about them care about them in earnest. What it feels like is the actual issue that these people want to talk about is they're angry that they are being seen as creeps. They're angry that all of these women that we can't, all of this stuff, if that's actually, it feels like more that you're personally insulted, that we're talking about what's happening to us. And so you're coming up with these reasons to pretend that you're angry about them.
He asked me a question.
You're not really angry about them. What you're really angry about is the fact that you can't be alone with a woman for too long because she might.
You want to know why I'm angry now? I'm angry that you dismissed how I felt like that. You didn't even think.
Exactly.
You didn't
And
even
that's
stop
really
to
what this is
consider
about.
my
It's dismissing
perspective.
your
That's
feelings,
crazy.
right? It's not because
That's
of anything.
crazy. But your feelings are valid, though, right? The woman's a traumatized woman's feelings, to where she can mistreat a whole group of men, is fine. That's okay.
Okay.
If I say I'm
Okay.
kind of worried about something, you just dismiss it. It doesn't matter.
Calm down, both of
Okay.
I want to
That's
dial
crazy.
down the temperature just a smidge here,
That's
right?
crazy.
Let me ask you, Fairy Queen. You can, I'll ask you directly, and then we can continue on with that conversation. You mentioned something there, and I wanted to interrogate it a little bit.
Sure.
You said that a lot of times these conversations are red herrings because men are angry or upset or scared that they're being called creeps.
Yeah.
Do you not think that that might be valid to be upset about and be worried about? The way society treats you, if you are labeled with certain things as a man or a woman, right? If a woman gets labeled a slut, for example, right? That has societal repercussions, serious ones depending on where you live, right? Depending on where you're surrounding with. If you're labeled as a loose woman, you have serious societal implications with that, right? That you will lose opportunities. Hell, you can't even get jobs in some cases as a teacher or something, right? They will pass you over for any kind of work with daycare with kids, things like that. A similar thing happens when you are labeled as a creep as a guy. You are not looked at for certain positions, right? You are not looked at, like, I'm talking the same ones, right? Teacher, daycare provider, things like that, right? And also your social life, there's real big implications with that. So when you have like society labeling you, right, as a creep just for existing, is that not worth having some concern over or a discussion over? Go ahead, Fairy Queen. And I just want to hear from Fairy Queen for right now. Then we'll go to Cham, and then we'll go to Xerxes again. Go ahead.
So I think my answer to you would be twofold. So one, the slut versus the creep. Okay. So I don't think, and I would be curious if anybody can find this, but I don't think that higher rates of female promiscuity correlates with, the likelihood that you might be sexually abuse a child, or the likelihood that you might be a sexually abusive person. And I don't think that that's true for men either. I don't think that promiscuity, the sexual promiscuity, is correlated with you like being abusive. And so the reason why it's an injustice for, and it would be the same thing for a male teacher if he was sleeping around with tons of people, right? The reason like why it would be an injustice for you not to be hired on the basis of your sexual past is because it has no if it has no bearing on your ability to be a teacher, right? I could see there being an argument that if you have an OF, that if you have like a history of like putting sexual content online, why it is that a school might reasonably not want to hire you, not because they fear that you might do anything, but because they're afraid of the fifth grader, getting onto the computer and Googling your name and then finding out that you did porn, and that interferes with your ability to be a teacher in the classroom, right? So I think that from that perspective, you could make the case that in some cases, depending on like what the situation is, it might be reasonable for the school not to hire the woman if she has done porn in the past. If it's for like an elementary school, or if it's for a middle school or a high school. For a college area, that's probably a little bit different. For a kindergarten or for a preschool, it probably doesn't matter at all. But if we're thinking about like whether or not so that's the first thing, okay? The second thing has to go with you're labeling the creep, okay? There are reasons inherent to being thought of as a creep to why we would not want somebody who is known as that to be hired for these positions, okay? For the obvious reason, there's a fear of higher likelihood of assault and abuse. Now, you're going to say, well, I'm just viewed as a creep simply for existing, simply for being here. I promise you, I've never met a woman in my entire life that has ever called a man a creep simply for existing. It's always because of some sort of action that they've done. It's because of some sort of thing that they've said. It's because of something that they have done, a choice that they have made.
They got dressed
that gives the indication.
They got dressed and then they came to the same
hold on.
environment.
People have called me a creep just because I have a beard. Like, what am I supposed to? Or my fucking teeth. Yeah, which
they
suck,
went to work.
Right?
What what they did. That was their action.
What am I supposed to do?
I'm gonna just pause right there. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. Like, I have never heard anybody call you a creep because you have a beard or because of your teeth. Okay, if anybody like is called anybody within these hemispheres, like sincerely referred to somebody as a creep or sincerely referred to somebody as being predatory, it's because they've seen the person say or do something that appears to be predatory.
I get called a creep because I have women on my panels. Because people think, oh, you must be sleeping with the women on your panels or demand that they send you nudes or some shit. Oh, yeah, like I'm Destiny or something.
You know what I'm saying, right?
But like, I can point you to like a lot of whole ass communities who said shit like that about me. I can point you to people who have gone to a lot of the women that I have on panels and asked, hey, can you release the logs? So we can find some shit that Wick has said to you, right? I can name a couple right now, right? Not everyone, obviously, but yeah, this is something that's happened.
Well,
no one's saying it doesn't happen. It's just
very
very small amount in which that actually happens without like them being a creep. Most of the time, when women call a man a creep, it's because their experience they had with that said man. Walking up to a woman and saying, hey, like, we don't call you a creep. We call you a creep because you fucking started doing shit.
Yeah.
Weird shit.
And to be honest with you, like Wick, I mean, I know that this is a complaint that I have heard through the grapevine about like a lot of women that have come on the shows. And it's not from you, it's from the audience. And that apparently a lot of audience members will ask, does she have an OnlyFans? Like after she comes on? Simply for existing and simply for being
isn't that more women's fault? I'm actually going to do the thing. I'm going to do the thing. But isn't that a part of the sisterhood that created an environment of which they will just on Twitter, just on X, randomly for no reason advocate for their own or advertise their OnlyFans? Isn't that more an issue that like the sisterhood, women between women, have created an environment where it's very well possible that they do have an OnlyFans and they are advertising it? Like, at what point are men just responding to the actions that women are doing on the internet? Let's have that conversation. Because you're calling these men a creep for something that's real. Okay? It's real. It's happening.
You remember when we talked about the creep thing? Okay. Like how like some people, like we say it because of people's actions. Okay. Well, Xerxes down here, okay, is giving used car salesman vibes. Whenever he talks, he goes like this. I feel like you're going to hold up a great big sign. You're going to say, "Buy today," okay? This shop is going
that
out of
makes me
business,
creepy,
okay?
right? Yeah,
Buy
I'm
this
creepy
furniture.
now.
It's
That's crazy.
75% off. You can get a couch for $10,
So watch
okay?
this. You've
That's
never
the vibes we're
you've
getting
never
from this.
heard it,
Why?
right? But
And it's not random, okay? I'm not
what?
just saying he is
So
acting
you
like a used
use your
car salesman
mystical
for
energy
existing,
aura
okay?
sensing
It's
powers
because of
in you.
this, okay? Look, I'm going to do the exact same things. He's going to go like this. Any minute now, he's going to
That's
pick up
crazy.
the sign,
That's
okay?
crazy.
We have, here's the QR code. We have a 75% discount.
That's crazy. That's
Come
crazy.
get
So you're
my
just gonna
mom's
make stuff
used
up
love
just to be
seat.
upset about.
Has
That's
no
crazy.
mice in it, I swear, okay?
That's
And
crazy.
this is a societal issue. Buy my shit, okay?
That speaks for itself. That's crazy.
Okay.
I hope people can see what we mean when we say vibes, okay? That's what we mean, okay?
That's
We
what you mean. What does that mean?
fits the bill.
So,
That's what
so
it means.
you sense the vibration in the air that there's something wrong. This is what's crazy though, right? You sense that issue with me. I've been since this entire conversation saying that both men and women should be protected. But somehow there's some creepy vibe coming from me that when I'm saying that victims should be protected, make it make sense. Because I'm moving my hands,
give
make it
him
make
like
sense.
a priest frock. You know what
You
I
see
mean?
what
Those
see
little
what I'm saying?
Roman collars.
Now notice.
No, I'm
now
wrong.
look.
You're not a used
Now
car
look.
salesman, okay? You're the guy that
Now
goes up to
look.
the pulpit at church, okay, and says,
Now look.
"I have seen the Lord," okay?
Now look. Notice she didn't answer. Notice she didn't
Any
answer the
minute now,
question.
fire and hail
Now
is gonna
look.
come raining down from the pulpit, okay?
Now notice she didn't. Notice she
It's not
didn't
your
address
money he's
what I just
after,
said.
friends.
I will say,
Now look.
it's sometimes okay to assume things about people. You should assume, for example, that I am going to read my super chats and ask you to super chat more, and ask you to like the stream, and ask you to sub this stream. But that's not creepy when people do that. It's expected because that's what I am. Okay? I am a guy who has a channel, who makes money doing these things. That's okay. I've had women on my show that do have OnlyFans, and guess what? They advertise them. Is it creepy, or why is it creepy, when a man just say, "Oh, does this woman have an OnlyFans?" I understand why it's creepy. It creeps me out, right? But I don't think it's inherently creepy. Does that make sense?
No, I disagree. I think that, and I understand that this is somewhat unfortunately normalized in the space, to just kind of expect that if somebody hops on a stream and if they have,
Yeah.
if they're
And
a
who
woman,
normalized it?
I think that it's female streamers who were able to get big because of that, but they
Yes.
are responding to the market, okay? And it's what the market demands. It is what the audience here is asking for. And it's very frustrating, right? To have the assumption made that because I'm here, or like if the Cham's here, that because we are here, okay, that we must have an OnlyFans somewhere, okay, when we don't.
Yeah, it's not okay for people to assume that. It's not okay for people to bring up. I wish people wouldn't, but that's not a men thing. That's a societal of Twitch thing. That's a culture of Twitch thing.
I mean,
because
are
women
asking
have
for
done
it?
that. Like I was on CuteBot the other day, right? Did you watch me on CuteBot? Did you see that, ladies and gentlemen? Right?
What's cute
CuteBot. Okay. Well, I'll show you the clips. It was me in a little bitty corner arguing with another guy in a little bitty corner. While CuteBot, bless her heart, and she's great, was in an American flag bikini making poses. Right? Why do you think they're tuning into that, gang? Is it to watch me argue politics? Is it? Maybe a little. Maybe you could find a few. But her audience, why do you think that, like, that culture on Twitch has been normalized, and again, more power to them. Women have capitalized on it, but they've also normalized it. This is a problem I'm having with this whole conversation. I'll bring it back to the very, very basic of the conversation, right? It's not men that treat, like, as Cham said at the beginning, that she blamed men. It's men did it to themselves. No. Society did it. Society. We all together. Me, I did it. Cham, you did it. Fairy Queen, you did it. Xerxes, you did it. We all did it together, hand in hand. And now what we're doing is we're pointing the finger at each other saying, well, you're more to blame than I am. Oh, no, you're more to blame than I am. When really, do you know who's to blame? Every single goddamn one of us.
Facts.
Well, no.
That's facts. Wix is speaking facts.
Saying, what me and Cham, well, actually, I don't know. What I am saying, okay, is that society is largely geared towards what men want to hear and what they want to say.
That's not true. I'm sorry.
Yes, it is. It's mainly about like what men want. And because of that,
Who told you that?
When you say, Wick,
how is that even possible?
Hold, let her explain. Let her explain. Then you can respond, Cersei. Then you can respond. But go ahead. Let her. I'm curious. Go ahead. Explain.
When you say this is what society has done, like you can say that, but like my response to you is that society is geared to, I'm sorry, to like what men want and to what they want to see and to what they want to say and what they want to hear. Okay. So of course there's going to be a woman that is in a bikini, right? Of course that's going to be the case. There's a reason why, okay, in this platform, why there's a woman in a bikini, like getting tons and tons of men. And there's not, for instance, a shirtless man with a book, right? Reading, romantic poetry as, the birds are swirling and there are tons of female chatters, begging to see and have tea with them, right? There's
for $50, you could have a shirtless man on stream right now.
But there are shirtless men just saying sexual things to women and getting them to strip on stream. That does happen, though.
I'm explaining like why, okay? The reason why, there's a reason why that is, okay? There's a reason why, okay? There is not this huge market, okay, for sexualized images of men, right? Where you have women flocking and throwing tons of dollar bills at them, okay? There's a reason for that. And the reason is because women are heavily shamed out of like expressing their sexuality in this way. And so like when you say to me society did it, well, society is geared towards the interests of what it is that men, particularly men in positions of power, want to see and what they want to say and what they want to hear, okay? And so I'll give you an example, okay? Do you guys know the story of the FLDS? Like what happened like on the compound?
Yeah, the fundamental Latter-day Saints. I'm well familiar. $50 from Audacity? Sorry, gang, or you're welcome, gang. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, so if you guys have heard about like what happened in the FLDS, that's fucking amazing.
I'm calling HR.
Oh God.
Calling HR.
Y'all didn't even let him get 2 minutes with his shirt off, man. That's crazy.
Baby oil now, okay?
Calm down, Diddy.
That too, okay?
No, I don't have an OnlyFans yet. Anyway, carry on.
Okay. What was I? I'm sorry. I was talking about like how.
Try to focus, ladies. Okay. My eyes are up here.
So the FLDS, what happened at the FLDS, okay? This was what we would refer to as a deeply patriarchal religious community, okay? It was a fundamentalist church of the Latter-day Saints, okay? So these were people, in other words, who believed in polygamy, okay? They believed in living the principle. And frequently the way that it was lived was very, very old men within the community, okay? So men who were like in their 70s, their 60s, their 80s, okay, were marrying.
Cham, thank you for the gift subs. I know that we're getting the content you want right now. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. A lot of their wives were barely legal. They were trained their entire lives to want to become the wife of the bishop, to be the wife of the prophet, okay? And many times these women were like 16, 17, like 18, like really, really young. There were cases.
Some as young as 12.
Yeah, there were teenage girls who were impregnated, who were married as wives and kept out of the public eye. But what also happened within these communities, because these older men wanted to have like complete access to these younger women, to these teenage girls to marry, a problem that they had was that the teenage girls and the teenage boys liked each other, okay? They wanted to date each other. The teenage girls, they preferred them. They wanted to date them. They thought they were more attractive. And so a common practice, like within these communities, within the FLDS community, they would take all of the teenage boys and they would put them in trucks and they would drive them out into the middle of the city and they would dump them there. They would abandon them. And the reason why they would abandon them is because they were afraid that they would encroach upon the teenage girl territory that these older men wanted to get in on. Now, I tell you this story simply to say that it's very possible that you could say that this is a system that hurts both men and women, that this is society and that this is everyone. But it's a society that's entirely comprised of the interests of male sexuality in men, not because it cares about all of the men.
In that locality? In that cult, it's cult.
Which it is, yeah.
Fair. No, fair. Yeah. Fair point. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Western society.
Yeah,
Like
but you see what I'm
West,
saying?
the
But do you
broadness.
understand why I'm
But
saying
I
that?
don't
What
think
I'm
I don't think it
saying
expands
is
the issue.
the fact that you can point out a group of men who are discriminated within this system, who are treated badly, does not mean that it is not a patriarchal system. That's the point of the FLDS community point. It is a deeply patriarchal community, but it's a patriarchal community that punishes men
Do you
for
think
the
that
interests of
applies to America as a whole?
men.
Or
Do
even,
I think
hell, even Twitch. Like, because we
do
were
I think
talking
it
about
applies?
Twitch, right? Do you think that applies at Twitch?
I kind of a little bit, obviously not to the same degree, but like the principle I'm talking about is that there are some people, okay, there's a group of men, okay, who are very, very powerful, who have interests, okay, who get away with being abusive. And so what they do, okay, and this is what some people do, what they'll do is they'll target smaller people, okay, and for being abusive or for breaking a rule or for whatever it is, and they'll harass and bully that person so that all of the attention is on this person and so that you don't pay attention to the big person. Okay. So an example of this would be, and this has never happened. This is like a theoretical example. So if Harvey Weinstein, for instance, wanted to really, nail and crucify his assistant to the cross, if he, for instance, sexually harassed someone, why is he doing that? He's doing that not because he really wants the place to be better for men and women. He's doing that because he doesn't want you to focus on all of the bad shit that he's been doing for ages and ages and ages.
But here's my
And
question though. Can I cut in for a moment? And instead of
You're cutting
reflection of
out.
some
Like,
type,
hold on.
am I?
Restart that over. Start that over. Because
All right.
we did not hear what you said because your
That's my
internet
bad.
cut
I'm
out. Yeah.
So what I'm asking is, why isn't this an issue that reflects Harvey Weinstein instead of an issue that reflects the patriarchy or men in general? Because that kind of sounds like only something men with power can do, which wouldn't that then belie the power is the problem and not the man? Wouldn't
no,
that belie that the character is the problem and not the man for quote being a man?
I think and I'll bring you up a similar example, okay, just to sort of explain to you why I don't think it's the same. The similar example would be the institution of slavery in the United States, like during the 19th century. And so, like, you could make the argument, right, that slavery only really benefited, a very small group, of elite gentry, in the southern half of the United States. It was only some people, the plantation owners, right, the slave owners, who cared. But that wasn't true. It was actually true that all white men, because even if it wasn't the case that you actually were a slave owner and you actually directly benefited from it, you still benefited from the simple fact that you aren't seen as the lowest rung on society. There is still someone beneath you, even if you aren't seen exactly in the same light. You don't have the exact same amount of power. It is still a benefit for you, even if you aren't the person in the position of power, to have an
Hold on.
underclass on which you can shit.
Okay,
and
I'm
but-
confused.
so-
Hold on. For
but this
my
is-
clarification, what does it have to do with bikini streamers on Twitch?
More than anything, just men in general, I would say.
So
'Cause
I think what
Go ahead. I'm
But
sorry.
hold
think
on,
what-
because just to redirect to the actual point I was trying to make, right, is that we talked about creeps, right, and men being labeled creepy and how that can have certain social stigmas. And then we talked about how men often behave in certain ways that get them labeled creeps. And one of those ways mentioned was asking asking ladies on OnlyFans or on Twitch if they have an OnlyFans. And the argument at this point, where we are now, is, well, I don't think that is necessarily indicative of creepiness because, and I think this is bad that it's happened, but it has happened because both men and women on Twitch have normalized it. Women have done it, men have done it. And do you know why they've done it? Not because of the patriarchy or anything.
No, it is. It's because women have been socialized
Because
to
of
be
this,
sexual.
baby. It makes them
and they've been-
fucking money.
Exactly. But that is exactly it, right? It's because women are socialized and are raised to believe and to see that they can make money off of their sexuality. It's because the understanding of like what sexuality is and what it means in our society is that, and this is actually an ironic thing, like it's counterintuitive, but it's actually money that makes sex something acceptable to participate in. Not love, not recreation, not actually caring about your partner. And I think like that speaks to a couple of institutions. It does speak to prostitution, but it also speaks to, frankly, it speaks to marriage, and it speaks to some arguments that have been made in favor of marriage. I think that, and I think that you don't get away from that perspective or that reality by saying, well, it's not the patriarchy. Like, what is the patriarchy? What is it that you mean? And what it is that we mean is that laws and that society and the way that people are raised is to believe that men are the default, that men are the subject, men are the people that we care about, like when we are talking about an issue. So much so that even when we bring up very severe cases of assault, abuse, terrible things that have happened, the only thing that we hear over and over again, but it really hurts my feelings, and what about me? And we've been hearing about this for years, even in the face of some of the worst examples of femicide that have happened, frankly, in over a decade.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Once you're done, we're going to pass the ball to Xerxes. Are you done?
Yeah. Not quite. There's one more thing. And then okay. I think another part of this too is the reason why I think a lot of people like have trouble with this is because the way that we understand what it is to be a feminist and the way that people think of what feminism is men and women are treated equally in society. That's the definition of what it is to be a feminist for in the minds of a lot of people. That is not my definition. My definition is men and women deserve to be treated as human beings. And the reason why that is my definition and not the other one is because I don't think it's a feminist thing for men and women to be treated the same if men and women are being treated like shit. Number one, right? It's not a feminist thing, right? To be treated equally if you're to be equally subjugated under the Taliban. Okay. It's not, I don't consider it to be a feminist thing if I'm also tied to like a chair and thrown off the side of a building alongside my brother because we're both gay. That's not a feminist thing, right? That can't possibly be it. And there are many examples of like where you really hammer on the equality as like being the metric of focus, where it turns out into an act of injustice. So for instance, there was one case, I think it was in Illinois, I'm not sure. There was a woman who
quickly, we do gotta.
Yeah, you're talking a lot, no offense.
There was a woman who tried to sue for discrimination for breastfeeding in the office, and the defense said that since men can technically lactate, it's not sexist for us to discriminate and fire you for lactating in the office and for needing to breastfeed and for needing a separate place to breastfeed. And so saying that we treat men equally is exactly the same in some cases like this one, and like the example that I gave with the Taliban, can actually be an example of extreme injustice.
Okay. Xerxes, go ahead.
Man, it's kind of tough to zone in on what to discuss in that, because you said a lot. And I know I was being a little bit snide, but you really did say a lot. I think there's so many issues. One issue I kind of have is the assumption of the patriarchy, or the framing of the patriarchy, that we assume men are the default and that we try to like protect them and focus on them. But that just isn't even true. Like even the subject of the conversation we're having right now, we still spend a good chunk of that talking about how the reason why women get more domestic violence is because the assumption is that men are more violent, more dangerous, and have more of a capacity to kill them, right? Like that ironically is not assuming that men are the default subject. They're the default, like objectively the default evil force in the world, right? That's so just even in this conversation as an example, I don't see why you would believe that or how you could go very far with that belief system, because it kind of really just isn't true. I mean, even if we look at the Twitch conversation, right? There's an economy going on of women who give the illusion of what these young men want. So they give them money, and that feeds back into they pretend to be with that woman, and it just goes around in a circle. Both people are quote unquote subjects, right? But they're also both being objectified. The female Twitch streamer objectifies the money and the attention that comes from the male viewer. But the male viewer also objectifies the female, who is the projection or the image of what they find sexually attractive. But it's males and females bouncing off of each other, right? It's like yin and yang. Now you shake your head no, but that's literally what is happening. And this is why I find it odd that there's a disagreement here, right? And this is why I think me and Wick are in alignment here, that everyone has a part to play in this, right? Men have a part to play in this. Young women have a part to play in this. What I was trying to communicate earlier in this whole conversation, right, is that to a certain extent, there's some things that men do within the group of men that's contradictory. So how about we focus on the fact that there are different subgroups and different people beyond the category of quote unquote man.
Like if we want to talk about like how men contribute, I'm absolutely happy to do so. Men will absolutely shame each other and
Yeah.
try to attack each other's masculinity, right? Over anything that you do, right? If you cry on stream as a man,
Yeah.
you're
You can
gonna be
say
clipped
that
and
you watched The Notebook, right? That's just a movie. You could have watched The Notebook with your girlfriend and then had sex with her later. That's still gay, right? That's how goofy it can be between men, right? But we're not all in alignment. We're not all the same, right? So the idea that there's like this force or this battle of like males and females, I think is goofy, and it doesn't really reflect like how the world is actually functioning and working. But we
So
keep on trying to make it work that way.
let's talk about how the world is actually like working and functioning, and like why I'm saying this is the case. Okay. So I've given this take a couple of times on why I think that discrimination against women is fundamentally different than discrimination against any
also, I
other.
want to make sure Cham gets a chance too. I don't
Yeah.
want you to like
Yeah.
take her out, but finish your point. But then we got to make room for Cham because Cham's been very, very well behaved, and I want to reward that. Okay, she's not
Oh,
usually
no.
well behaved, so go ahead.
There is always going to be an interest in controlling women's sexuality because women make all the people. This is a fundamental fact about any society. If you want to have a society, you need to have people to work. You need to have a fresh supply of new people to come in and replace the old. That is an economic problem that all countries have. So, if you want your country to be a very specific way, and you are completely evil and you don't care about being kind and you don't care about basic human rights, and you want to control exactly how many citizens you have, what ethnicity those citizens are, what language those citizens learn, where those citizens come from, et cetera, et cetera. If you want to have complete, absolute control of that, the way that you do that is by controlling women's sexuality. You control and you could take away women's choices, you can take away women's bodily autonomy, and you treat them essentially like cattle. And the reason why, if you completely evil and if you don't care about anything, okay, if you can do that, then you can have effective control, a totalizing effect across every aspect of society, because you can't have a society unless you have people, and you can't have people unless you have people that will make the people. That's your first way. The other option is you can import labor. So you can have, so this is the case, you can replace your labor force by having new people come in. You can have a strong like immigration policy where you allow people to come in to replace the labor force. Or you have two other evil options. The interesting one is that you automate the jobs so that you don't need, to make new people to replace them. Or you are evil and you enslave people and you force them to like do all the stuff, right? So that's why when we say that something is a patriarchy, when we say that something is male controlled, these are the kinds of forces that we're talking about, okay? These are broad forces
I
that are
think
going.
that doesn't apply as much.
Here?
I see your point. I get your point. I understand it, right? But we have, as a society, gotten so much better at it overall. But the problem is the scales aren't adding up, right? Like, we haven't gone to justice. What we've done is we've highlighted women's issues, which is needed to be highlighted, but we've decided that in order here's how this works, and I'll let Cham go after this, right? Because this is how it works, and I see it all the time. This isn't just women's issues, it happens to, right? But it does happen to women's issues. People will be like, I'm an ally to women. I'm a feminist. And someone else will be like, well, you know what? I'm more feminist than you, and I'm so feminist, I don't think that men just are a patriarchy. I think that they should be jailed. And the other guy will go, no, well, I think that not only that, I think that they're guilty of everything. I think they should be not just jailed, but, shipped off, some exiled, right, from the country, taken away from citizenship. We had in Britain, right, I think it was 2 years ago, they wanted to make it illegal for men to go out after like 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. Eastern, or 9 p.m. England time, I'm sorry. That was an actual bill that went to the floor, right, of their little parliament thing, right? It's this constant wanting to signal how much of an ally you are. This isn't just with women's issues. This happens with every fucking issue, right? And it's how we get these extremist red pill crazy positions. Yes, that's absolutely how it works.
Well, I want to defend the rad femme because what I'm saying right now, like this totalizing thing that I'm talking to you right
Okay,
now,
first of all, what do
this
you mean by rad femme? This is almost a whole
You
other
also gotta get
discussion, and I
Cham
want to
in.
make sure Cham gets in too, right?
I mean, when I'm talking about radical feminists, I'm talking about people who are scholars. So I'm talking about people like Andrea Dworkin, Catherine McKinnon, Germaine Greer. These aren't, not all of these are scholars, but Audre Lorde, you know, Shulamith Firestone. I'm talking about like the theory, okay, that was written in roughly the 1970s to the 1980s and roughly the end of the 1990s. I'm talking about an entire philosophy that sees, you know, the question of like sex inequality is not simply about, you know, creating equal rights is like women, men and women being able to choose to do whatever it is they freely want, but as a society that views both men and women as human beings. And I push this because I think that the egalitarian model, it sounds seductive, it sounds like it could be true, it sounds like it should be true, but when you actually plug in a lot of hypotheticals and you actually look at it from a bird's eye view,
Yeah,
you
you
find
want different things for different genders. Yes, that's what you want.
no, it's not just that you want different things.
Yeah, she's the thing.
It's at the level of analysis and understanding why sexism happens, why it perpetuates, why it's a structural systemic issue,
Okay.
why it exists in such. These are not perspectives that you can have as an egalitarian feminist.
Cham, go ahead.
Yeah, there's just a lot of talking, and I don't think we're really going anywhere with this
Sorry,
situation.
Cham.
So, I don't really have it like
Do you
any.
guys mind if I bring on a couple callers?
Sure. Can I go to the bathroom? I think I just need to pee really bad.
You don't have to ask me permission.
Yeah, I just went
I
to the
don't know.
bathroom.
You might deport me.
I
or
can hear you guys, but
You are
just
so well behaved,
I'll
but you
mute.
don't need to. Okay, you could just.
Okay.
You could
I'll
just
be.
go.
I'll be. Just like it's been the whole
Okay.
time. I'm sorry, my bladder. I'll be back though.
Okay, do your thing.
I'll
I'll
be
bring on
listening.
some people who are backstage, who's been backstage a while. And I know these people, so they're not gonna ruin the stream, right? So, okay, you're both live. What do you have to say? What are your thoughts here? That one guy and Zitsway. And thank you for the subs, by the way, earlier. Zitsway.
Of course.
What are some of your thoughts? Why'd you drop backstage? What did you want to talk about in
He was here
regards to this
first, so I'll let-
conversation?
he can go.
I don't think he's here. He's muted if he's.
Oh yeah, give me a minute, man. You can go ahead.
Oh, okay, fine. So in terms of this conversation for both of you, what exactly is it that you would say you want? Like, if you could make some sort of change, what is it you actually like a goal, like a more goal-oriented thing that you would want to change?
I can tell you.
Is this to me? Is this to Xerxes? Is this to Fairy Queen? Who's this to?
I guess that's
Each of you, actually, I'd like,
Okay.
if I could.
I'll just give my concise answer. I'd like it where we stop making assumptions based on gender, on who is a victim and who is not. I think men's issues are overall taken less seriously. So some of the changes I'd like to see is that when a man reports a problem, whether it to be socially to his friends or whether it be societally, and he calls like the domestic abuse hotline, I think that they should get the same treatment that women get, the same belief that women get, the same kind of seriousness that the way we treat women's issues, right? I think that we should elevate men's issues to that. That's what I would like to see.
I can tell.
Yeah.
So
Agree.
the thing that I want,
Lightning round this,
yeah, one thing that I would love to walk away, maybe plant the seeds of this, is that young men should get the fullness and grace of being a human being. I mean by that, the same way that we stop and try to figure out why are women behaving in some way or why is statistic activated some way, we give that same grace to young men and we stop and we think, okay, what's going on here to get us the same defense, the same knee-jerk that we have and say, well, how come lesbians have higher divorce? I mean, not they do, but how come lesbians have like a higher, domestic abuse rate? The same way we say, well, hold on, wait. Maybe it's this. Let's give that same grace to young men. And when I say give them the fullness of being a human being, I mean, understand that there are evil machinations as much as there's kindness in being a human. There's a whole character, there's a whole story, a whole background that got a person here that isn't simply they're born a male or they're born a female. There's something that happened in their life. Let's figure it out. Maybe it makes sense why they're here. Maybe it doesn't. We don't know. We can't just say, well, he's a male, so we're just going to assume that he's a creep and he just desires something horrible from the woman. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. We don't know. But the assumption that he's villainous, I think, is something that we really need to work on just as a people. It's not right. We don't do it to young women. We shouldn't do it to young men.
Dairy Queen, go ahead. And then Cham, if you heard the question. And then,
That's right. When you ask the question, what are your goals? Do you mean what are your goals for the topic or what are your goals for the conversation?
The topic, not the the topic itself. Yeah.
The topic. Okay, well, I agree with what Wick said originally. So if it's the case that there is a need, I think that there should be male single-sex spaces just for men for domestic violence shelters. I think that like putting more campaign dollars and putting more public funding into outreach programs, into mental health services, into public health campaigns, like telling men here are the services, here are the places you can go, and especially if those are single-sex spaces, I think that that's a very good thing, and I think that that should happen. But while I do think that should happen, here's what I do not want to have happen. I do not want co-ed. Like, I do not want the currently like single sex only spaces for women to become co-ed. I don't want, a good thing for men to be a bad thing for women. I want there to be single sex spaces for men and single sex spaces for women. Okay, specifically. That's specifically what I was said that's why I talked about female only single sex spaces at the very beginning. So I want there to be like campaign donations. I want there to be public funding to outreach for men. But I do not want that funding to turn currently single sex spaces for women to become co-ed spaces for men and women. So that would be my answer.
Okay. Cham, do you got an answer for this?
Yeah, I think the best way to tackle mental health is to help provide like more resources federally or by state. I do think there are options like that. It's whether men decide to get educated on that and look it up themselves. I also think men should stop relying on women to be their emotional support animal. And so I think there are a lot of things that men can do on their own, but they choose not to. Or they choose to be victims. I don't know.
Would you mind expounding on just what you meant by like emotional support animal? What do you mean by that?
A lot of times men go to women for essentially they're having issues and they put all that emotional weight on women instead of actually going and getting the proper professional help. And I think a lot of times now women are kind of sick and tired of it.
Are they really? This is ridiculous to me. Almost every relationship I've ever had with a woman has been her putting her emotional issues onto me and me being a makeshift therapist. What is this take that you have? This is so alien and ridiculous to me. I don't even understand the basis for why you believe that women are tired of men putting their emotional problems and weight on them. Like that's a thing men typically do and are known for in society to do. Most of the time when women talk about men's lack of emotional intelligence, it's that they don't do that. Not that they do. Where is this idea coming from?
Women are known to actually go get help, go seek therapy more, go seek help through their friends. Men tend to find their partner, which I think before you actually have a partner, you should figure all that shit out by yourself or on your own.
Oh, I don't even
men and women, by the way.
But like he said, right, and we'll let you go in a second. Like this isn't a men's issue or a woman's issue. I've been on too many where the first thing I hear is how they got mistreated in every single other relationship they've ever been in.
Say it
cool.
Again. My ex did that.
Right? Like this is something that people do. It's not men do. It's not women do. People do that. And yes, you're right. It's annoying. It should stop. But let's not try to genderize that, right? Let's let that one guy go.
You said let's not try to genderize that. That kind of brings up like the main reason why I even wanted to come on here. We almost have no choice but to genderize it because people do it when these conversations emerge. I can't even begin to count how many times a woman will bring up an issue and immediately after a man has to just counter with an issue that he has in his own life that is male only. And same thing, vice versa. Women will do the same thing to men in my life. That stuff, treating the issues that are bred to us, that are given to us due to like social norms and the economy that we live in and the world that we live in and the culture that we breed, to try and make that a gender thing and to make it a competition on top of that is, to me, just ridiculous and stupid. And it always leads to conversations like the one y'all just had for like the last hour, where you're arguing about experiences rather than what's actually the problem. How do these experiences affect the way we interact with each other as genders? How does it affect our relationships? How does it affect how we raise our boys, how we raise our girls? Those building blocks affect literally everything that happens to us for the rest of our life. How we treat women, how we act towards other men, how we treat other men, how we treat trauma in our life, how we treat other people's trauma in their lives and in ours, how we respond to it, how we react to it. All these things are built upon by social norms, our culture, how we were raised. And you guys are arguing about just, well, this happened here, this happened there, this happens to that person. We understand that, but what's the cause of it? What's the reason for it? What do we want to do to help fix that? How do we want to promote change? How do we want to actually talk to each other rather than competing over trauma? I don't, this is what y'all been doing for the last like hour and a half, and it was funny, I'll give it that, but it was also
I have to disagree.
uneducational and unnecessary.
No, I think my issue with that is, I've said multiple times from go that the issue that I wanted to bring up is that both men and women who are victims should be protected. I've from go have been trying to establish that. The questions I've asked have been geared towards, why aren't we giving these young men who are also victims that same grace and consideration? I've been
I
trying to get
understand
there
that
the
you
whole
have
time.
been trying to bring some things up. Fairy Queen also was trying to bring some things up. The problem
We contended
was
with
that
every
when
time she
both
brought
of
it
you
up.
did it, the problem was that when both of you did it, you often did it in competition with what the other person had just said, to compete with the opposite gender's version of what you had just said. That immediately discounts whatever you're going to say after. You proved it, how every time she said something, you wouldn't even let her finish, because the moment she genderized the opposite topic, you couldn't stand it, and you just had to keep interrupting and saying, well,
I
that's not this,
fundamentally
that's that.
disagree.
She did the same
First of
thing
all,
to you.
overwhelmingly, I have allowed Fairy Queen to say her point. Overwhelming. I've just sat there and listened. In fact, there are multiple different blocks where she said in the last exchange where I couldn't even get through all of it because she said so. It's not true. I can't
Okay.
let that walk. That's not what happened. And we can
I
watch
would,
back and see that that's
I
not what
would ask
occurred.
you, because I was actually, from the moment I sat in this chat is when it started. And I have probably been in here for over 30 minutes. And then he let us all backstage. That's when it started. And you continued it for a good 30 minutes. I'm not saying you're a bad person. None of that stuff. Don't take this negatively.
No. The reason why I
happened.
disagree, it's not about being a bad person. It's about the way that we even framed this conversation originally, right? Is that there's a negative assumption about young men. That's what the basis of the conversation was to begin with.
Mhm.
We're trying to argue about the fact that these young men should get some degree of grace. That's where I've been coming from this entire
To get
time.
some degree of what? I didn't hear that word.
Grace.
Okay.
Grace. Right? That's what we've been going for. What I'm pointing out with Fairy Queen is that in these types of conversations and discussions, we start from there's something wrong with young men. We demonize them from go. That's what the whole discussion has been about. And that's what we've bore witness to the whole time. Cham did the same thing. So before we can even move into that, we have to first break through the demonization that's being framed to young men.
Just for the sake of time tonight, because I do want to talk about the hurricane stuff, and we are coming up on the 2-hour mark here. But this is such a great discussion. I'm going to let that one guy respond to that, and then I want to make sure that Zetsue has gotten his point out, right? And once that happens, we'll get to closings, and we'll transition to the hurricane stuff, because that needs to be talked about too. Should I put my shirt back on for that?
Go ahead.
Gang, I'll let you guys decide whether I should put my shirt back on for that segment.
I'm getting a bit chilly in here.
But yeah, that one guy, the pokies be poking, right? But that one guy can go, and then Zetsue, go ahead.
No, but I like I said before, like I do agree that the topics, the things that you all were bringing up, none of that is false. Like none of it is inaccurate. None of it doesn't belong in the conversation. The question is how willing you are to move past it and to breed the conversation to where it needs to be. It often felt like one person would say one thing, the other would attempt to counter, and during the attempt to counter, the other person would no longer accept it based on the fact that you're countering it due with another gender's experience. The whole point of this is to talk about, well, men are experiencing something and we feel as though those experiences are being neglected or at the very least not even heard. And what I tend to find in my life is often that exact same thing, but it stems from something else. I know a lot of people that be like, oh, they say all men ain't shit, or we don't do this, or we all men are cheaters. And I understand that. But more often than not, that's coming from a place of just saying it. If they truly thought that, they truly believed that, they wouldn't be dating someone while tweeting it. They wouldn't be fucking someone on the side while tweeting it. They don't actually believe it. They're saying it because the majority of the men they know, or somebody just did it to them a week ago. And then you try and breed a conversation off of it, or you don't ever talk to that person. When you're trying to have a conversation, you move somewhere. If you're gonna sit and like try to like compare and contrast every single experience another person has, we're never gonna get anywhere. The whole point is to try and find a baseline agreement, something that we can agree on, and then move on from there. If we're just bringing up differences and competing on it, we're never going to agree on anything. So we can't conversate. We're just arguing.
This way. What do you got?
All right. So I'd actually want to ask Cam and Zerswith just a quick question, because both of you, when Cam, I think that's pronounced her name, right? You had mentioned basically that
Cham, but
kind of
fair
many
enough.
Cam. Gotcha. So Cam, you mentioned how that men need to basically stop relying on women for their emotional support animal. And Zers, you countered basically your own experience in saying that types of experiences where you've had to act in an emotional support animal way to women. And so I'm guessing by Cam's the way she said it, that you've had to do that for men, like yourself, that you've had to be the emotional support animal. And so thus you have experience in it and have the ability to talk on it. Am I wrong on that, or would you say?
Whether,
No, you're yeah. Oh wait,
yeah,
was that was
I
right
mean,
for you, right?
yeah, I mean, in general, on myself and other people, it's kind of known a lot of times that women are essentially doing this role of being emotional support before a man is usually like ready to like either like a friend and or if it's like a lover or something like that. A lot of times men haven't figured out how to emotionally aren't emotionally developed yet, and therefore they push a lot of things onto women, and having the women in their life to try to figure it out for them versus them figuring out for themselves before they get into any form of adult relationship, whether it's friendship um or if it's romantically. So a lot of times like it becomes like toxic and it becomes overbearing, and then when the woman leaves, all of a sudden it's like, well, she wasn't there to support me during my worst times. And it's kind of like, well, you weren't set, you haven't created a system where if you know something is gonna, like, if you're not emotionally set, if you have like emotional problems, then you don't really, like, you don't tackle it until you become in a relationship, and then it like becomes a hindrance later on.
So
I would love to fully grant that that's even Cham's experience or the experiences. I mean, I'll fully grant 100%. I'm not even going to dispute it. The problem that I have is the idea that women collectively are tired of something young men are also experiencing too. There doesn't appear to be a gendered problem because I have never had a woman take on my emotional load and burden. It's never happened, but I have always taken on the emotional load and burden of the women that I've been romantically involved with, or the women that I have been friends with. Always, just overwhelmingly, that has been the case. So it seems like there's boats missing each other in the night or something here, because Cham is saying women are tired of it, and I'm saying me and other young men are tired of it. So these two groups of people aren't clicking or talking to each other. It seems to be some discrepancy here. I think the better way to just frame this
I'll tell you the
would be
discrepancy. There's leaners and there's lifters in life. You can find women who are leaners and women who are lifters, just as you can find men who are leaners and men who are lifters. Yes,
so yeah.
that's a problem.
So
but
I think
will
that's just a people thing.
Just real quick, because this is something I want to touch on before I have to use the restroom, and I'll let you guys argue for a little bit while I'm gone. I'm curious, right? Should someone's intimate partner, whether it be in any relationship, be expected to take on any emotional burden? I think actually yes. Actually, yes. Actually, if I'm having a fucking bad day, right, I don't want my partner to say, I just can't deal with it right now. I want someone to listen to me, right? I want someone to listen. I don't think that's being an emotional support animal.
No,
that's
just being
being
fine. what
Yeah.
the issue is when you yourself as a person don't know how you deal with your bad days. So if you're having a bad day, you know yourself like, okay, I don't like it when I don't like to be I want to be alone and stuff like that. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to talk to you. Like I just want to like time to breathe. And you as when you are developing, that's when you figure that out, because when a situation arises, you don't like blow up or you yell because you don't know how to deal with what that current situation is. That's just learning to be an adult, and a lot of times men aren't able to do that. They don't know what to do with that. And most of the time their emotions
People.
are straight
Yes,
up just
people.
angry.
People
But
often
exactly,
don't know
I'll
how.
grant that there's some men
But
like that. But
while
why?
you guys
Why,
argue,
why would
and
you
when I
not
get
grant?
back, we're gonna do closings, and then we're gonna do a hurricane thing. So
Yeah, it's like my thing, Cham, is why can't you grant that there's young women that aren't the same, and this is more a general issue of emotionally unstable people instead of a male female.
Sure, I think there are a lot of times where, in general, men and women are emotionally not there, but the thing is women are grown up to control their emotions for a reason versus men aren't.
But you see, so then this is where the friction lies, right? Because I grant 100% there are women who are like that, but I haven't encountered them. I've encountered the women that didn't grow up, right?
Okay,
So
I mean,
like
that
we're,
doesn't
we're
that's, like,
missing each other in the
anecdotal.
night.
That's anecdotal.
Yeah, but what you just said was also anecdotal. Thing.
You
No,
guys
but it
aren't.
but
And
but it's
I've
been but
granted
it's
it. I've granted
but
it
it's
fully. I'm not
but
even
it's
going to
been
dispute it.
known, like, through the divorce rate why women are not staying around besides other things, but a lot of times in this new day and age, women are leaving their partners because the men aren't emotionally inept to deal with their life,
But this is
and
my
that's
issue,
shown
right?
through, like,
Why do we assume
statistics.
that those women are just the greatest of narrators of what happened, and that they too, also being a participant in the marriage, also didn't have their own issues and their own failings? Why
Everyone has
do
their own
She's
issues and
not
their
Well,
saying
own
that.
that's what
struggles.
that's what I'm saying, right? So why don't we look at this as an an emotional instability issue that some people are having, and we need to get through there,
Do you
instead of
think
saying
women
or
have more
framing
to
that
do
women
you
have
think
been raised to do this,
Do you
because
think
every woman hasn't
women
been.
have been do you think women have grown up to deal with their emotions more than men?
No, I can't.
Like, do you think, like, men have been taught not to learn what to do with emotions, their emotional
I can't say that. No. Mm-mm.
what do you mean you can't?
I've seen a lot of young men who have a lot of
You cutting
they
out
just
or
can't.
you
They just. Oh, I'm sorry.
just cut out?
Am I back? Yeah. No. The internet has been. Yeah, it's been dipping in and out.
Mm.
I'm muted on my end. Hold on. Let me. Yes, I know. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I hope you can. Okay. Great. So I'm throwing a flag on the play. We are transitioning from this topic to the next. But before we do that, I'm going to give each of these people, lovely individuals, an outro, last thoughts, and where you can find them. I have links to their stuff in my description on the YouTube. Please click on that. Please give them a follow. Make sure that you support them, everything like that. After we get through that, me and Fairy Queen are going to be talking about the hurricane, its devastation to the southeast, and the responses to it, and perhaps what you can do. And yes, I will get to all the super chats too. Hey, you know what? Let's just do that first, and then we'll get to just let me make a little money, then we'll get to it. Cool. And you guys can address it in your closings. Oh my God, there's a lot. $2 from Blahikabla. So hold on, where should trans men go for shelter? $5 from the Trib for Xerxes. Do you feel that fear of women is reasonable? If so, is there something that justifies it? Studies, something that happened to you specifically, etc. $5 from Audacity. Guys with
The answer is
autism.
yes.
Yeah, but get to you in your closing. Sorry, I'm gonna lightning round these, right?
But I'm going to lighten around it. The answer is yes.
Yeah, gotcha. $5 from Audacity. Guys with autism that affects their social capabilities are oftentimes mislabeled as creeps. $10 for Psychonaut. Man with facial disfigurement was asked to leave a restaurant for creeping out customers he hadn't even sat down. $10 more from Psychonaut. The market also asked for more engineers. Why didn't these women go into that industry instead of OnlyFans, apparently? $50 from Audacity to take off my shirt, which has been fulfilled. $5 from Audacity. Hey, Wick, I heard it's impossible to touch both elbows to your belly button at the same time. Nice try, buddy. $2 from Vigilante. In Britain, men legally can't be raped. $5 from Manny to the Max. There's no patriarchy in the West. Identity politics sucks. Reject Earth. Embrace Mars. $2 from Testicle Johnson. Separate but equal. $5 from Audacity. Fun stream as always, but I've got a dip. Got to go shadow box in front of the women's shelter piece. $2 from Slong and Stew. Wick, why aren't you wearing a shirt tonight? It's money. $5 from Trip. For top left, what do you think would be a good point to stress when it comes to men's issues? Do you think it's about making spaces, about discourse? And then finally, $5 from Rabid Wombat. Women overwhelmingly raise and educate all children. If women are tired of emotionally stunted men, why don't they raise boys differently? Hashtag mom fails. We're going to start with Cham, and we're going to give Xerxes the last word. Cham, closing thoughts.
Yeah, so my closing thoughts is I think there are actually resources for mental health, for men's mental health. I think a lot of men just either don't look into it or ignore it, or their solution would be just to somehow pivot to like blaming women at the end of the day. I think as a man, you and as an adult, you should figure out what to do in adversity, and with that I think that just makes you will help you out a lot in life, so
Where can people
we're
find you?
not always your problem. You can just at me in Wix Discord server
Check it out,
if
gang.
you're
Go to the
mad.
Discord. Thank you for being here, Cham. Really appreciate you. Always do. Fairy Queen, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the seriousness, and then I'm going to address this conversation. Okay. So if you are serious, I'm going to restate what I said at the very beginning and what I said and what I responded to Zetsweet. I believe that's how you say your name. So if you care, okay, I do think that investing, money, public funding into campaigns, indicating where men can go to seek mental health, like mental health outreach programs, public funding for single sex spaces only for men, for domestic violence, intimate partner violence. So I think that having, as long as it's a single sex space, having a male only domestic violence shelter, I think that's a good thing. And I think that if you have a representative and if this is an issue that you care about, I think you should talk to your local representative and you should lobby for this to be an issue. Or you can do what a lot of feminists did. You can go and you should ask, you can build your own shelter. Okay, you should advocate to build shelters of these sorts, which is what lots of women had to do, throughout the 1900s and the 20th century. So if you're serious, okay, I'm on board with you, and I hear you, and I think those are real issues, and I think those are issues that should be addressed. The reason why I say if you're serious is I think that there are some people that are watching this show for whom that is a real problem that they care about. And then I think there are some people that are watching this show that frankly don't give a shit about this, that don't really give a shit about men being abused by their partners. They don't give a shit about men's mental health, really. They don't give a shit about any of these issues. What they really care about is the fact that they saw something on Twitter that said something that was kind of mean about men, and they care about the fact that they're lonely and that they can't get a girlfriend. And so they are pretending to care about these other issues that they have, about experiences that they haven't really had, in order to pretend to be angry about something they're not really angry about, to justify the real rage that they have. Okay. We can't, I don't know. I've had so many of these conversations, and it's very exhausting, right? To feel like you have to bat down 1,000 inauthentic, disingenuous points about an argument that the person clearly doesn't care about, so that you can eventually wiggle around to the real thing that they really want to rant about. The fact that they can't find a girlfriend and nobody will love them. And we have to acknowledge that that is the underbelly of this conversation. So if this is a serious issue, if this is something you've actually gone through, and if you need resources, then know that I'm with you, okay? And that I hope that, and I think that public funding should be spent your way, and I think that help should be provided and should be brought for those things. But I don't think that that's the same thing As a bunch of men who are sitting in their basements worrying and who are angry at the world because they can't find anyone to sleep with them. And I think that we need to acknowledge that that is a huge factor of why these conversations happen. I don't feel that they're honest.
Where can people find you?
You can find me at It's Me Fairy Queen on YouTube and on you can find on YouTube and Twitch, and you can find me at It Me Fairy Queen on Twitter.
Check her out, gang. Thank you for being here. And she's going to be with us for the next segment. So, hooray. Xerxes, last word. Sorry, caller enters, but you don't get a closing. Sorry.
So, one thing I would like to say is I feel like Fairy Queen's dismissal of young men being angry because they can't find someone to love them or even just have sex with them is hilariously arbitrary. Two things can be true at the same time. A person can be upset at the fact that men in general in society are being mistreated, and they can be upset at the fact that no one loves them and they don't have a friend, and they can be upset about the sex. I will fully grant that there might be some people who are disingenuous and definitely use, say, the manosphere, use these topics or spaces to cover up that rage and anger that they feel. The issue that I have is, one, if it is the case that they have that anger and it is the case that they feel that way, why are they being dismissed like they don't matter as a whole ass human being with thoughts, feelings, and emotions and an entire story? Why don't they get consideration? Just as I have just seen multiple different videos in my recommended feed and have watched of women complaining about how they're lonely and how they don't have pretty privilege and how they can't find a man that they want to be with, do we just dismiss their anger and feelings too? I would imagine that no one here would say that we should. Be as it may, when it comes to this conversation in general, I think the conversation itself kind of highlights the fact that men, for whatever reason, which we can get into or we need to get into at some point, have an assumption that they are some type of demon or that they are some type of danger, and they don't deserve the consideration that they can be victimized by young women on the point of the domestic violence things we were looking at. In fact, I asked numerous times, how come these young men don't get the same grace and consideration when they too are victims? And the response is, well, it's because overwhelmingly men are the perpetrator. I grant that fully. Let's just say that it is. I'm not even going to dispute that statistically. Why then cannot the men who are the victims, as we specifically say, get that same type of protection? Why is there even any friction in society at all to where we need to have this conversation even be born? I would imagine that the fact that the conversation even needs to be had would highlight some type of issue on this topic all by itself. And what we've seen today, unfortunately, is that that friction comes up because for some reason, men are not considered to be whole ass human beings that do need some love and do need some consideration and do need some help. Hopefully in the future we can go over this again and actually get in.
Where can people find you?
So on YouTube, I am BassFZZ, BASSFZZ. That's where I'm at. I'm on Twitter, same handle. And you can watch my videos.
Check them out, gang. Thank you for being here. Caller inners, thank you for calling inning.
Wait, would you mind if I just one last thing, just real quick?
Briefly.
Very quick, just because I didn't get to finish my last point, but just regarding, because the reason I asked the question of just both Cham and Cersei was basically to say that just as we have specialized shelters basically for men and women, we all need the people who speak to it as well. From what I've been listening to, both Fairy and Cham both seem to have experiences with basically the issues that women face regarding men. And so that's what I would expect them to speak about. That if they have to somehow give up time to speak about men, that doesn't seem to be what their experiences is and their knowledge. And it would almost be a waste of everyone's time to have them do that. Just as for Cersei, I don't think we have much value in you telling what men can do better because you probably have more, based on what you've said, you have more experience in what they have to deal with and how women can do better. And so,
well, I would disagree. There's plenty of different ways I can argue how men can be better, but I say this on my channel all the time. I don't really need to, and the reason why I don't need to is because Fairy Queen exists and Cham exists. With the quickness they can point out all the problems with young men.
Everyone here exists. I'm happy. You're all great.
I'm also
You're
happy
all
to
awesome.
exist.
I'm gonna move everyone out except for Fairy Queen, so we can talk about the hurricane. If yeah, that's what we're doing. I love you all.
Adios.
Stay mad. Get laid.
Thank you.
Okay. Now it feels a little weird. Because I don't have a
put your
shirt
shirt on, please.
Yeah.
Please
give me a second.
Okay.
Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, a moment.
Okay. What should I do here? Okay. Hello, everyone. I am not looking at chat, so I do not know what it is you're saying to me. Are you well? Are you safe? Does your home have electricity? I don't know. We're about to find out, okay? Do you, in fact, have the power? We don't know.
Look, a lot of people are saying don't let her pressure you. We all have, we should treat our guests and not distract them overly much. It would be very distracting for any woman to be on a stream with me where I'm shirtless. And I want to make sure she has her entire faculties, okay? That she isn't distracted, right?
Absolutely.
Just as it would be hard if we had someone in a bikini on here, right? For me to focus, it might be hard for her to focus. But I wanted to talk, and I know this is going to be a little whiplash for some of you, but it's important, right? I've seen a lot of videos out there of the just devastation that this latest hurricane has wrought. And I'm hearing more and more stories. And Fairy Queen will tell hers as well, right? And funnily enough, she wasn't the first person today to tell me a story about something that's happened. I won't get into the other story because it was told to me privately, right? But the question becomes, is the government and are the state or the federal government doing enough to help the victims of these hurricanes or this hurricane? And I think that in the case of certain places, the answer is no. The answer is just no. They haven't done enough. But Fairy Queen, tell the audience the same story that you told me. You can go ahead, give us the spiel.
So I'm going to try to be vague about specifics where I live because I don't want to accidentally dox myself, but I am going to just tell you, I'm going to tell you two different stories. I've been through two different, not hurricanes, but tornadoes, like natural storms. The first one was in Omaha this past summer. We had a huge storm. It was a huge historic storm. We had a tree that blew down in our front yard. We had trees that had blown down in our backyard. Huge, enormous trees, like huge branches. We had tables that were destroyed. We lost power in our house for like a couple of days. But because I was with my family house and because my family is pretty advantaged and because we were pretty well off, we were able to work together as a family. We had friends. We were able to work together to get rid of all the branches. My mom had money to pay for food. She had money to pay men to come and cut up with chainsaws to come and tug all of the branches away. So in Omaha, even though it sucked losing power, and even though it sucked, like having all this stuff happen, we were still able to get through it. And then I drove down and I came back to South Carolina for work. Okay. And what do you know? Okay. Another hurricane hit, and it was not at all the same. The area where I live down here in South Carolina is, I'm just going to very bluntly, it's a poor neighborhood where I live in. Okay. And just to give you an example, just to illustrate to you, and I say this not to pity myself, but just to sort of illustrate to you why it's a big deal for this place to lose power. Okay. So the place where I lost power at, okay, we have tons of stray animals, tons of stray cats that get into garbage, tons of stray cats that reproduce behind the apartment complex. We have tons of violence that happens. I've heard gunfire that has happened outside of my apartment. There was one time I tried to order a pizza from Domino's, and they don't deliver down here, and they don't deliver here because the last driver was shot and killed. There was a case of one time I was driving away and I found an ex-prostitute who was sitting in the ditch crying, her face covered with tears and half of her face with blood because her boyfriend had socked her in the face. This is a place where people here make some of the least amount of money, like within our county. Okay, it's very, very low. Down the street, we have a cheap grocery store. We have a dollar store. We have a gas station. We have a cheap restaurant that's nearby. These places are important for these people, and it's important for these people because the amount of gas that you have in your tank, you measure how much gas is in your tank. You don't drive all over town. You go exactly to work, you go exactly home, you go exactly to the grocery store, and then you come back and you do not drive anywhere else because everywhere you drive, you are losing money, okay? So what happened when the hurricane hit was not only did my entire neighborhood lose power, but the stoplights lost power. The gas station lost power. The cheap restaurant down the street that lost power. The grocery store, only 5 to 10 minutes away, that also lost power. And so we didn't have power for a couple of days, and I was really, really worried. And I was really, really worried because I work as a student. I don't make a lot of money. And I was really, really worried about all of the food in my fridge spoiling. And I was worried about the food in my fridge spoiling because I didn't have the money to replace it. So what happens when what happens when you live in this neighborhood is that you can't just burn $200 worth of food, okay? If that $200 of food is destroyed, that's it. That's gone. There's no replacements for it. And not only that, but because the fridge is spoiled and your food is spoiled in the fridge, it means the fridge now has to be thrown out. Because guess what? Now there are bugs in the fridge, and I was given advice from different people to fill my entire bathtub up with water in case the city accidentally the water was cut. I was told to go get a propane tank, to get a propane stove. I was told to go to the stores, go get this, right? And I just didn't have the cash or the money for it. And this has really impacted and hurt a lot of people. And
What kind of aid has gotten to that area that you're in?
I don't know is the short answer. I'm not sure, like right off the top of my head. What I do know is, so just to everyone knows, I'm okay. The power did come back on. Okay. This is what I have not seen. I have, to the best of my knowledge, in the place where I've had, I have not seen any like free food, any free water bottles, like there hasn't been like a place, here is a place where you can go to where you can plug in your Wi-Fi, or you can plug in for anything. I haven't seen or heard of any announcements like that as of yet. Here's what I do know, okay? I mentioned the stoplight thing. That's not just in my neighborhood. That's true for a lot of counties, a lot of places. The stoplights are out. I tried taking my computer to go into restaurants to go sit down to plug in. And you know what? I couldn't do that. Why? Because they weren't letting anybody into the building. You could only pay with cash. And in many cases, these drive-through places would only let you go through the drive-through. So guess what? You can't even go in there to sit down, right? To go get food. And it's a huge, huge deal what happened. Now, I'm lucky because I got power back, okay? But half of my state right now, where I live in South Carolina, I think it's approximately 790,000 people do not have power. And if that's roughly the estimate for not just South Carolina, but for North Carolina, for Georgia, for Tennessee, for all of these places that are roughly located within the Southeast, that means that it's probably over 1 million people. Over 1 million. It's probably a couple million people who have all lost entirely no power.
I've seen a lot of images from the various areas of severe flooding, of severe destruction to property and things like that. Has there been any of that in your area?
I haven't seen I haven't seen the severe flooding. That hasn't happened like in the county that I've had. What I have seen is branches. Trees are everywhere. The branches are everywhere. Trees have fallen down. No, it's everywhere. Like the power lines are down. You'll be driving through a neighborhood and you'll see power lines that have like fallen down in various places. You'll see, and this was true when the power went out. Guess where those people went? They didn't want to stay in their muggy apartments. So guess where they went? They went outside. So now you have a ton of disgruntled, angry people who are hanging around outside of gas stations that are not turned on, outside of restaurant facilities, outside of closed grocery stores. This is not a recipe for anything good. This is a recipe for people getting into fights and for people getting into trouble because they're angry and because they're outside together congregating. This is not good. And this is just true. Half of my state, I have students right now who probably will not have power until like roughly Friday of this week. That's a big deal. And that means that I have people that can't come back here. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because at least in Twitch poll, at least until today, okay, I have not heard anybody mention this. This is a big deal. It's a big deal. And not only is it happening right now, but it's going to happen again. I just spoke to someone recently in a store when I went to go get some food. And she told me that there are 2 hurricanes that are going to come up in the future. One is Hurricane Isaac. That probably won't impact people. Apparently, that is in the ocean. And then there's another one called Hurricane Joyce. That is supposed to hit, and that is supposed to impact. I mean, what are we going to do if we don't have relief aid, if we don't have people that are doing... I am concerned on a couple of fronts. One, I'm concerned about the lack of relief. I'm concerned about the lack of aid. I'm concerned that, and secondly, I'm concerned that before, like previously, I said I was going to vote for Kamala, but I'm going to vote for Republicans to go in the House and to go in the Senate. That was my position, okay? But if I find out that the Republicans in my state have been blocking relief aid in any way, shape, or form, that will be a reason for me.
Do you think that they are?
I don't know. What I do know that 82 MAGA Republicans, like in this, I'm not apparently voted to shut the federal government down. I know that for a fact happened, and that for sure has an impact on the relief aid that's. And so I'm not sure is the answer. I just came on to talk about this today.
Yeah, and obviously I'm in Pennsylvania, gang, okay? So I am not in the area that's been affected by the hurricane. So all I can tell you is secondhand accounts of what I see on the news, right? What I see on the Twitters and things like that, right? But I used to live in Florida back in the day, okay? And I've been to a hurricane or two. Florida, for all its faults, whatever, they have pretty good response, at least. It's always been pretty good at responding. I remember one time power was out in about a week at the city I lived in at the time, right? A week-ish. But they had aid that came in. The National Guard was called up. They would escort like aid trucks and things like that. Do we know if your state has called up the National Guard to provide any of this help?
I don't know, but let me
Can you
see.
check
South
real quick?
Carolina. Yes.
Because that's a
I
big
can.
deal. Like Katrina, they called up the National Guard. The National Guard, this is one of the things the National Guard does, right?
Yes.
Is the governors
Yes.
call them up. They help distribute relief and aid that they get from the government, both the federal and the state. And they do projects like infrastructure building, things like that, right? Restoration.
Mm-hmm.
Has the I think South Carolina is the state you're in.
Yeah.
Have they done any of that? Because from what you're saying, there is a need from just the description you're given.
So it does look here that the National Guard is doing something. So the South Carolina National Guard is supporting local and state agencies as they continue to respond to the hurricane's aftermath. Despite power outages, blocked roads, downed power lines, and widespread damage, the South Carolina National Guard is actively engaged in helping, blah, 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 blah. It looks to me like the engineers. That's what they're doing. So the National
they're
Guard
restoring
is sending out
probably power lines and stuff. That's probably that, right?
Yeah, that's what they're doing right now. They're going out and they're trying to fix the power lines, which is good. This is part of why I'm talking about money and stuff. I can't prove that this is happening. I can't prove it. I don't know that this is true. It might just be me having a conspiracy brained moment, or maybe I'm just frustrated from these past couple of days. But it's the impression that I get when I'm driving around is that wealthier communities and neighborhoods are getting their power back quicker than communities and neighborhoods that have less money. And the reason why I think that's happening is because these neighborhoods because they're wealthier, they have more modern wiring. So it's easier to fix. It's easier to fix the power line if you're talking about a house that's relatively modern, as opposed to fishing through all the wiring, of a living community that lives in a structure that was built in the 50s, right? That obviously is going to be a lot more difficult to fix. And so that's my suspicion about what's happening, but I don't know that that's happening. I can't prove that that's what's happening. I do know, in fairness to conservatives, apparently Trump is supposed to come down here. My understanding is that he's supposed to come to Fayetteville, North Carolina. He's supposed to be there on October 4th, and he's supposed to also come down to visit Georgia. He's also visiting Georgia soon as well. I'm not sure what he plans to do, but apparently it's supposed to be a town hall. It's supposed to be occurring again in Fayetteville, North Carolina, this upcoming week on Friday, October 4th. So that's something to note. Here are a couple of other things. So it looks like I'm getting a ton of things. Let's see. So it looks like Goya Foods. It looks like Goya Foods in Florida and the Carolinas and Georgia. It looks like they are trying to provide relief. So that's good. This person is a conservative. He keeps linking this to show me that the Trumps are trying to show support to the victims, and that they're trying to provide relief down. And it looks to me that, let's see, according to this food, by collaborating with Sweetwater Mission Food Bank and Laura Trump, North Carolina, South Carolina, Global Empowerment Mission in Fields and Atlanta Community, blah, 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 Goya is providing food to families and individuals greatly affected by Hurricane Helene. So we have that there. There was an argument that was made by this person that apparently 700 members of the North Carolina National Guard were just deployed to Kuwait instead of helping out. And his critique is specifically that they're not being sent; they're being sent somewhere else instead of being sent here.
700. Hold on, just for scale, gang. Do you guys know how many National Guard members came out in Katrina? 50,000. 1,000 here or there ain't an issue, okay?
Yeah.
So this also, can I address, because I've seen this as well, right? That people, and I infamously perhaps, there's a tweet made recently. Donut Operator made this tweet where he lamented that his mom was living in an area that had been affected by the hurricane, which was out of power, and apparently was still out of power at the time of his tweet. And he said that he wished that the tax dollars he had been paying had gone to help her instead of to Ukraine and Israel. The comment I'd make there is these are separate buckets. They're dealt with separately. Us sending HIMARS, like a HIMARS ain't gonna stop a hurricane. A Javelin missile isn't gonna stop a hurricane. That's what we're sending them. Like, these are different things, and they're different buckets. You can say that we should spend more domestically on domestic relief and relief agencies and programs such as that. I agree, and that's why I vote Democrat, right? Because if you want a social program, you're going to vote Democrat. It's just true, right? Like, Republicans, conservatives generally are going to vote for less social programs because of a wide variety of reasons. We can get into that. They think that charity should be handling it, right? They think that the whole bootstraps mentality and things like that. But when it comes down to it, right, to blame the slow response, if you don't like the response to the hurricane, fair. But to blame it on Israel or Ukraine is just nonsense. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah. Well, here's, I just pulled up Fox News, okay? This is what it's saying regarding the hurricane. So it's saying here that Trump made a stop in Valdosta, Georgia, to receive a briefing on the devastation, to assist with relief distribution, deliver remarks, and to take a few questions from reporters. This is a quote from Trump. Quote, "I've come to Valdosta with large semi-trucks, many of them filled with relief aid. A tanker truck filled up with gasoline, a couple of big tanker trucks filled up with gasoline, which they can't get now, and will be working to distribute it throughout the day," Trump highlighted. Harris headed back to Washington, D.C. on Monday morning, cutting short a Western campaign swing. The White House said that the vice president would travel to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, so FEMA, headquarters once she arrives in the nation's capital, where she will be briefed on the impact of the hurricane and the federal response to support, rescue, and recovery efforts. Over 120 people have been killed by Helene since the hurricane made landfall in Florida late Thursday, before tearing through a path of destruction through the interior southeast.
Yeah, people are just to put a pin on that, like, people are dying from this, right? This is a serious thing. The bombing and stuff, thank you for this. There are emergency declarations are still in effect for Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. They're in a state of emergency, right? So for the federal government, FEMA is the go-to here, right? They're the ones distributing it. And thank you, Tomfoolery Show and their viewers, for coming by to say hello, right? You missed the man versus women. Now we got people versus hurricane. So, thanks. Jump on in, right? And that's the thing. Like, this isn't just talking points or politics. People's lives are on the line, right? So if that's true, if Trump is coming in with relief to the extent that he's doing that, bravo, good. To the extent that other people aren't, they should do more. Absolutely. But that said, FEMA is going to be the on-point person, and I hope that they do a good job. I'm not there. I can't speak to on the ground. You are, and it sounds like for your area that you are living in, nothing's getting done. That's what
feels very
it sounds like.
It feels frustrating. I will say this in the favor of the university. So the university where the local university, like of my state, it has allowed people to access the locker rooms in order to shower, to have access to fresh water in case they don't have access to water because the water was shut out because they don't have access to power. They are allowing students to come to the student union, like so that they can have access there. It does look like they've extended like the hours of dining operations. All of those things are happening. I don't see anything here. I see that they're at the community shop, to donate food. I see that that has been placed here. I see that some things are being placed here. Here's what I don't see, okay? When I lived in Florida, when I was at Florida State University, we had a hurricane scare from Hurricane Hermine, okay? When that happened, what did the university do? The university said, okay, look, you can all come down to the convocation hall. We know that none of the dorms have power. So come down here. We will give you free food and we will give you free water and we will support you and we will help to find you parking. Like they did all of that. And all of the students got in a huge line and went to that convocation center to get food and bottles of water and then to go home with. I haven't heard of that happening here at the university where I'm in. I haven't heard if there is a government agency that's passing up, because that's what people need. People need food and they need water and they need gas. Okay. They need the things it's easy to sort of laugh, at Trump, coming down to sort of hand out a sandwich and a paper towel to all of these people. But that's what these people need. Okay. We need food. We need water, clean water. And if it's not provided, the reality is that some of these people are going to be really, really fucked. You're going to have people, forget about skipping meals, okay? Forget about not having enough food or clean water, okay? Like, there are going to be people who, because they can't keep things in their fridge, they're going to have to buy out new food, which means that they're not going to be able to pay their mortgages. They're not going to be able to pay their rent. It means that a lot of bills that they otherwise would be able to pay, they're not going to be able to pay them now, right? So yes, the food matters. The paper towel matters, okay? I don't care if he's handing out napkins and forks. It's better than like what anyone else is doing right now. And honestly, when I'm happy on the one hand that Biden is getting FEMA to do its job, okay? I'm happy about that. That's a good thing and that should be happening, okay? But he's not campaigning for president. Why isn't Biden down in Valdosta? Why isn't he,
Kamala,
in Tennessee? No, I'm not talking about Kamala. Kamala, I understand she's campaigning and she may not have the ability to. I understand that, right? Biden is not campaigning. Biden is on his way out. He is the president. Why is he not here? Why is he not in Valdosta? Why is he not in North Carolina or in South Carolina or in Tennessee? He is the president. He's not right now, maybe that's not going to be true in November, but it is true right now. So why isn't he here?
Sure, instead of providing all the necessary accoutrements for a presidential visit, the security, the money that would take, the transportation, the fuel that would go towards the transportation, the security, all that, perhaps the state should be focusing on providing for the needs of the people instead. So there are reasons, right, that big figures stay out of disaster areas and should, because with them comes a lot of resource drains. And I can't mind reading Biden, right? But there is something to be said about just going to the administration who does that, kicking their ass into gear instead of coming in and making it a production where instead of getting the power fixed, now they have to make sure that they got Secret Service everywhere, right? Because it sounds like the state government is failing too, right? It sounds like that they aren't doing their job, or at least not good enough. And why give them that extra burden of a fucking presidential visit? I don't know. That's my
I don't know. I see the argument for that, and I understand that, and I think that it was even referenced and stated in the article that I just found, on Fox News. I think that is the reason that Biden gave. But at the same time, can we just admit that, I think that Trump does have a point when he says that it sucks that that he is here with semi trucks with food and with gasoline,
and
and he's trying to help.
photographers to
Eh,
document all that, and
But who
with Secret
cares?
Service that again is a drain on the fucking resources. So yes, he looks great doing it, but the question is he actually impacting things in a positive way or a negative way? And I don't have the ledger. I can't balance that. And again, to the extent where he does pass out food, good, right? But it is a honest question and one I don't have the information enough to answer. Where should these resources be allocated? Where should people's attention be allocated? Because every moment that the governor is glad-handing people at the Trump rally on the 4th is a moment he's not directing resources to people who are fucking without power, who's had their homes destroyed in a flood. He's not directing that, right? People can't, heads of state can't be everywhere at once. And so it does.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. And I understand that like the president or the vice president or anyone from the administration can't be everywhere at once. I get that. Okay. And I understand that it probably would be a production for one representative to come all the way down here. Okay. But given the scale of destruction, okay, just given the massive level of devastation, this is not just one little thing that happened in one town in the United States. This is happening to like 4 different states. This is affecting millions of people.
The Southeast
and
region. Yeah.
It would be extremely meaningful, okay, if maybe not Biden himself, maybe not Kamala, maybe not both of them, but if someone from that administration actually flew down to one of these places.
Do you remember Katrina? Do you remember when Bush did that? How'd that go for him?
I'm sorry, you're older than me. Okay, I don't remember it.
Sure. I know you're a little fair enough, but I remember during Hurricane Katrina, Bush did that whole helicopter flyover thing where he went and he tut-tutted and oh how sad this was. He was roasted fucking alive for doing that, and to an extent, rightly so, right? Because again, and I have this argument with a lot of people in a lot of different spheres. There's doing good and then there's looking good. And sometimes to do good, it doesn't look so good. Does that make sense?
Sometimes, though, to do good is to look good, though, is my response to that. And I think I see what you're saying and you're not wrong, okay? I don't think that like it should like him like coming down and performatively seeming really good, at the cost of him actually doing good should be the move, right? But I do think at the same time, I think it is important, okay, for when a natural disaster of this size happens to so many people, that the president comes down and not hangs out above everyone and like for video or for photographers, okay? But he actually talks to some of the people to whom this is impacted, and he visits them and he hears them and he goes physically to hand the stuff, because even if it is a huge production, I don't know. I don't necessarily care that Trump is like putting on a production. You want to know why? Because that production is still putting a sandwich in someone's mouth, okay? And even if it is a production, even if it is for show, even if it is all performative and bullshit, I'd prefer the performative bullshit that puts food in people's mouths and gives people gas.
I'll give you. Yeah. Which would you rather? You spend an hour at a soup kitchen, right? Or let's say a whole day at a soup kitchen where you hand out and you feed 500 people. But that day, you fed 500 people, right? You've worked at that soup kitchen. You've had the cameras on you. You've done good. Or you could take that same day and put energy into cutting through some of the red tape, to getting on phone calls with local leaders for disaster relief, governors, making sure that the federal relief and the state relief don't fucking clash, right? And no one is going to see you do this, right? But instead of 500 people getting fed, you've just fed 50,000. But you didn't get the photo op. Which is better? Which do you do? Which do you spend your day on?
Obviously the latter. However, what I'm also saying is, like, if you're the president, okay, I don't know. I think that it does matter. And if it was the case, right, that all of this relief aid was flooding in, right? If it was the case that the government was really doing such an amazing job, right, of handling this, and that's why he's there, because they're doing such a great job, because he's really just focusing on this, right? Then maybe I might be able to have a point. But it doesn't seem like that, at least from the boots ground, from my boots on the ground perspective,
Sure.
okay?
I
That it's
can't
not what
speak
it
for
looks
that
like.
perspective because I'm not there, obviously, right? And it does sound like the relief just isn't getting there quick enough. I don't know why.
It's just not.
Yeah.
This is, and again, right?
But we
I'm gonna go back
politicized
to
it in my chat, right? Which makes sense because this is a political channel, right? But this is always going to be the case. This will be the case until the day I die, and it's been the case since I was born. That any disaster, any event, immediately becomes, and that's why you shouldn't vote Republican, or and that's why you shouldn't vote Democrat. Every time, no matter what. That is just a truism of life, okay? It's just true. Meanwhile, we have a situation where you're at where, regardless of why, regardless of who's at fault, aid ain't getting to you. Aid ain't getting to your area. That sucks. And then we just had a whole argument about whether or not to shut down the government, right? If the government got shut down, there would be no fucking aid. No federal aid would be going in there. That sucks. So again, like again, there are problems with social programs. There are. But social programs, this is what these are made for. Wouldn't it be nice if we had more social programs in that area to take care of things, boots on the ground, local programs that were run locally by people who actually lived in those areas? It'd be great.
I'll just give you another argument for why I think that like it's important for Biden or for Kamala, and forget about whether or not it
I
actually
guess
helps people.
President Biden's going to North Carolina on Wednesday, apparently.
Oh, is he really?
According to my chat, which
According to,
can
is that
be
true?
reliable,
Okay.
cannot be reliable. Right?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, here's a reason, okay? Forget about like whether or not it actually impacts the people, which I agree is the most important thing. Let's think about the fact that this is an election season. And let's think about the fact that North Carolina and Georgia, they were both 2 of 7 key battlegrounds whose razor thin margins decided Biden's 2020 election victory over Trump. And these are the states, that could determine the outcome of the 2024 showdown between Harris and Trump. So what does it mean, right? If you are running for office.
Okay, just to be clear, I've seen an article in New York Times and the Wall Street Journal that also said he's coming Wednesday, which a little more trustworthy than Wick Chat. Just a tiny bit though.
Okay.
Not very much.
Right. Well, that's very, very good that he is, because, okay, let's just think about this from a political perspective, okay? If you want to be reelected, okay, if you care about being reelected, probably visiting the states of a highly affected area that was hit by a natural disaster.
Hold on.
That determined the outcome
I'm getting a fucking revelation all from God. You know what's going to be said? Why is he doing that? And not making sure that all the aid's getting by. He's gonna get roasted just like Bush did. It's gonna happen.
I don't know. I think that like him coming down is a good thing, and I am actually glad to hear that he's coming down to North Carolina to actually talk to people here who are on the ground. I think that is important. Yeah. I think it says something about you and as a president. I think it says something about your priorities. And you don't just exist as the office manager of the United States when you're the president. You are a symbol of America. You are a symbol of like what it is to be an American and of what your values are. And if you don't come down, like when a huge amount of people have had their homes destroyed, like in the middle of a huge hurricane like this, you're demonstrating something about what you think the values of the American people are supposed to be. And to me, I think that like part of a value you should hold is standing in support when your people are suffering. And I don't know, that's my thought.
So,
well, we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, there is, again, as someone who has done kind of like, because again, like them or hate them, when I was a church going man back in the day, right? A Mormon to be specific. every time there was a hurricane or a national disaster, we'd strap on our boots, we'd get down, we'd be in the streets, we'd be cleaning up those tree branches. I've cut many a tree branch down in my day, right? But there were some areas that didn't want us there, right? There were some times in some areas that said, well, no, we want you doing X instead. Could you please help with Y, right? And it wasn't as showy, right? We couldn't bring our cameras and things like that. But I think it was helpful as well. So I don't know the answer to this question, to be clear. I don't know which is more actually valuable. And yes, there is something to be said about the values of an American president and what he values. But I'm not sure that I want a president who is going to look good instead of do good. Hopefully you can do both. I don't know. But yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to say on the hurricane thing? We are running out of time, unfortunately.
No, that's all I have for now. I'll keep you updated
Please
though.
do.
The Weather Channel of
Yes, and
Twitch.
please keep informed on what aid does get through and how things get done. Unfortunately, there is a limit on speed. Like there's a point where you can give all the resources and dump all the money in the world. You can only fix things so fast. And with, again, the widespread nature of the devastation slows that down. If you want to get food, you need roads that are clear. If you want to get roads that are clear, you need to get the equipment and the manpower into those places. The logistics of it can be a bit of a nightmare in these situations. But it does sound like the state has called up the National Guard. Good, right? It does sound like FEMA aid is getting in to some extent. Good. I'd like to see that do better. But that's an easy thing to say. Thank you for being here, gang. Gang, tomorrow is a vice presidential debate. We'll be watching that live. That'll be fun. Might have some call-ins before then. Wednesday, we're going to have a state of the race discussion. We're going to have great people on to talk about that. And then Thursday, we're going to have a filibuster debate. Should we get rid of the filibuster? And that will be fun. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's go. We'll right into, are you streaming right now?
I am not, no.
Oh, you make this hard. Okay, let's go to... Who are we going to? Prime Guy? Okay, let's go Prime Guy.
Okay.
Wait, bye-bye.
Bye.
Keep waving. You got 8 seconds of waving.
Bye.
Waving. And yes, no Cal Mike tomorrow. We're going to watch the debate and then talk about it. So, see you guys later. Bye. Bye. Bye.